Before you fall asleep tonight, imagine finding a letter in your mailbox. A letter written by someone who died 15 years ago. A letter that knows exactly what happened yesterday. A letter that ends with 6 impossible words. Meet me at the lighthouse tonight. And what if, against all reason, you went? Part 1. The Letter in the Rain. Before you fall asleep tonight, imagine hearing rain against your window. Soft at first, then heavier, steadier, as though the sky itself has settled in for a long conversation. Now imagine that somewhere inside that storm, a letter is making its way toward you. A letter that should not exist. A letter written by someone who has been gone for 15 years. And yet, somehow, it arrives. The rain had been falling since late afternoon. Not the violent kind, not the dramatic kind. Just a patient rain. The sort that turned streets silver. The sort that made old memories feel closer. Ethan Carter sat alone in his small coastal house, overlooking the gray Atlantic Ocean. The windows rattled softly as wind moved across the shoreline. The room smelled faintly of coffee, books, and old wood. The kind of smell that belongs to homes that have seen many years pass quietly. A lamp glowed beside his favorite chair, golden light against a dark evening, comforting, predictable, safe. Yet tonight felt different, though Ethan couldn't explain why. Have you ever had one of those evenings? An evening when nothing appears unusual, yet something deep inside tells you that life is quietly preparing to change? Ethan had felt that strange sensation since morning, like a forgotten song playing somewhere just beyond hearing. Outside, waves rolled against the rocky coastline, far away, steady, endless. Their rhythm had always comforted him, ever since childhood, back when his father would bring him here every summer, back before everything changed, back before goodbye became permanent. Ethan closed the book in his lap. His eyes drifted toward a framed photograph sitting nearby. The picture showed 2 people standing beside an old lighthouse. One was Ethan, 12 years old, smiling. The other was his father, Daniel Carter, tall, kind eyes, wind-blown hair. A man who always seemed to know the right thing to say, even when life didn't make sense, especially then. The photograph had been taken 20 years ago, 5 years before the accident, 5 years before a storm much worse than tonight's storm changed everything forever. Ethan reached for the frame. His thumb gently brushed the glass. "Miss you, Dad." The words escaped quietly, almost automatically, like a habit, like a prayer. The rain continued falling. Then, a knock echoed through the house. Ethan blinked, looked toward the front door. Another knock. 3 slow taps. Strange, very strange. Nobody visited Blackwater Point after dark, especially during storms. The nearest neighbor lived almost a mile away. Ethan stood. The floor creaked beneath his feet. The house seemed suddenly quieter, as though listening, waiting. The 3rd knock came, softer this time. He crossed the room, opened the door. Cold air rushed inside. Rain drifted across the porch, but nobody stood there. No car, no person, no footprints. Nothing. Only darkness, and the sound of distant waves. Ethan frowned, stepped forward, looked around. Then he noticed it. A single envelope, resting on the porch floor. Perfectly dry, despite the rain. His stomach tightened. Something about the sight felt wrong. Not dangerous, just impossible. The envelope looked old, cream-colored, slightly yellowed with age. No stamp, no postmark. Only his name written across the front. Ethan Carter. The handwriting instantly stole the breath from his lungs. No, it couldn't be. He stared, blinking, trying to convince himself he was mistaken. But he wasn't, because he knew that handwriting. He had known it all his life. Every birthday card, every Christmas note, every lunchbox message during elementary school. The same neat letters, the same gentle slant, the same unmistakable hand. His father's handwriting. Daniel Carter, dead for 15 years. The rain seemed louder now, the ocean farther away, the world somehow less certain. Ethan picked up the envelope, his hands trembling. Inside the house, the grandfather clock ticked softly. Tick, 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 like a countdown, waiting, watching. The envelope felt warm. Not cold, not damp, warm, as though someone had been holding it moments ago. A strange symbol had been drawn on the back, a lighthouse surrounded by stars, and beneath it, 6 words that turned Ethan's blood cold. Meet me at the lighthouse tonight. He stared at them, again and again, unable to look away, because beneath those words was a signature, one he never thought he'd see again. Love, Dad. Outside, far beyond the rain, far beyond the dark sea, a distant beam of light suddenly appeared, turning slowly through the storm, from the abandoned lighthouse, the lighthouse that had been dark for 15 years, the lighthouse that should not have been shining. And as Ethan stared toward it, the light stopped, pointing directly at his house. Part 2. The handwriting he never forgot. The lighthouse beam remained fixed on Ethan's house, unmoving, steady, impossible. Outside, rain drifted across the dark shoreline like silver threads. Inside, the warmth of the living room suddenly felt distant, unreal. Ethan stood frozen in the doorway, the letter still trembling in his hand. The beam from Blackwater Lighthouse stretched across the storm like a finger pointing directly toward him, waiting, watching, calling. Slowly, Ethan closed the front door. The latch clicked, a small sound, yet somehow it echoed through the house. The grandfather clock continued ticking. Tick, tick, tick. The sound seemed louder now, as though time itself had become aware of something unusual. Ethan looked again at the envelope. His name, his father's handwriting, the familiar shape of every letter, the way the E curved, the way the C dipped slightly lower than normal. Details nobody else would know. Details nobody could fake. And yet, his father had been gone for 15 years. 15 years. Long enough for grief to change shape. Long enough for memories to soften around the edges. Long enough to learn how to keep moving forward while carrying an empty space inside your heart. Have you ever missed someone for so long that the pain stopped feeling sharp? Not because it disappeared, but because it became part of who you are. Like a scar you no longer notice until something reminds you it's there. Ethan knew that feeling well. For years he had carried his father's absence quietly. Some days were easier, some days harder. But tonight the old wound felt suddenly fresh again. He walked slowly toward the lamp beside his chair, sat down, placed the envelope on the table. For several seconds he simply stared at it, afraid to open it, afraid not to. Because once he knew what was inside, everything might change. Or perhaps nothing would. Perhaps this was a cruel joke, a coincidence, some elaborate prank. But deep down, he already knew it wasn't. Because no prank could explain the handwriting. No prank could explain the warmth of the paper. And certainly no prank could explain the lighthouse. The lighthouse that had been abandoned since the year his father died. The lighthouse that now shone through the storm. Ethan swallowed, then carefully opened the envelope. The paper inside unfolded with a soft whisper. The handwriting was unmistakable. Every line, every stroke, every tiny imperfection. His father's. The letter read, "Dear Ethan, if you're reading this, then the light has returned. I know you have questions. I know you're frightened. I would be too. But there are things you need to understand. Things I should have told you long ago. Tonight, come to Blackwater Lighthouse. Come alone. Bring the photograph. Trust the light. And whatever happens, don't leave before midnight. Love, Dad." The room became silent. Completely silent. Even the rain seemed farther away. Ethan read the letter again, and again, and again. The words never changed. The handwriting never changed. Nothing about it felt fake. Nothing. His eyes drifted toward the old photograph beside the lamp. The one showing him and his father standing near the lighthouse. Bring the photograph. Why? What could possibly be important about that picture? A chill moved through him. Not fear exactly. Curiosity. The kind of curiosity that keeps people awake long after midnight. The kind that whispers, what if this is real? Outside, thunder rolled faintly across the horizon, far offshore. Ethan stood and walked toward the bookshelf. There was something he needed to check. A small wooden box rested on the highest shelf. Dust covered its surface. He hadn't opened it in years. Carefully, he brought it down, set it on the table. Inside were dozens of old letters, birthday cards, postcards, notes, every piece of handwriting his father had ever sent him. Ethan opened the first card, then another, then another. His breathing slowed, his pulse quickened, because every sample matched perfectly. Every curve,
every line, every tiny detail, exactly the same. Not similar, identical. The realization made his stomach tighten. A memory surfaced unexpectedly. A summer afternoon, 20 years ago. the lighthouse standing against a bright blue sky, his father sitting beside him on the rocks. They had spent hours watching waves crash against the shore. At one point, Ethan had asked, "Dad, do you think people ever come back?" Daniel had smiled, a thoughtful smile, not amused, not dismissive, just thoughtful. Then he had answered, "Sometimes love finds a way to leave messages." At the time, Ethan had laughed. He'd been 10 years old. The answer had sounded mysterious and strange. Now, sitting alone in the storm 15 years later, those words felt very different, very important. Little did he know, that memory would soon mean more than he ever imagined. The grandfather clock chimed softly. 9 o'clock. 3 hours until midnight. 3 hours until whatever awaited him at Blackwater Lighthouse. The beam still shone through the rain, unmoving, patient, as if it knew he was coming. Ethan walked to the window. The ocean stretched into darkness, cold, endless, mysterious. The lighthouse stood atop distant cliffs, a black silhouette against storm clouds. Its light sweeping nowhere else, only his house, only him. Tell me in the comments, what would you do? Would you stay home? Or would you follow the impossible litter? Ethan already knew his answer. Because some questions refuse to let go once they've been asked, and some mysteries become part of your heart the moment they arrive. He returned to the table, picked up the photograph, slipped it carefully into his coat pocket, then gathered the letter, the old envelope, and his keys. Outside, the rain intensified. The storm deepened. The road to Blackwater Lighthouse wound along cliffs that most people avoided after dark, especially during weather like this. But tonight, the lighthouse was calling. And somewhere deep inside, Ethan felt as though he had been waiting for this night far longer than he realized. As he reached for the door handle, something fell from inside the photograph frame. A folded piece of paper, hidden behind the picture all these years. Ethan froze. Slowly, he picked it up. The paper was yellow with age, unopened, forgotten. And written across the front, in his father's handwriting, were 4 chilling words. For the night it returns. Part 3. The road to Blackwater Point. The house felt smaller after that. Not physically, but emotionally. As if the walls themselves had moved closer. Watching, waiting, listening. Ethan stood beneath the warm glow of the lamp, the newly discovered note resting in his trembling hand. For the night it returns. 4 words. Simple words. Yet they seemed to carry the weight of years. Of secrets. Of promises never explained. Outside, rain tapped steadily against the windows. The ocean roared somewhere beyond the darkness. And far away, the lighthouse beam remained fixed, patient, unmoving, like an eye that had already seen the choice Ethan would make. For several long moments, he simply stared at the folded paper. Then slowly, he opened it. The paper crackled softly, old, fragile, waiting 15 years to be read. Inside was a single sentence, written in the same careful handwriting, the same familiar hand, the same impossible hand. If the light ever returns, follow it before midnight. Do not be afraid of what remembers you. Ethan read the words again, then once more. A strange chill moved through him, not the cold kind, something deeper. The feeling that a puzzle piece had just fallen into place, only to reveal how enormous the puzzle truly was. What remembers you? The phrase echoed in his mind. What could possibly remember him after 15 years? And why had his father hidden this note behind a photograph? More importantly, how had he known this night would come? The grandfather clock ticked softly nearby. Tick, tick, tick. The sound reminded Ethan of something his father used to say. Time isn't always a straight road. At the time, it had sounded like one of Daniel Carter's many strange sayings, the sort of mysterious wisdom children rarely understand. Now, Ethan wasn't so sure. The lighthouse beam continued shining through the rain, waiting, calling. And somewhere deep inside, he knew there was no turning back. A few minutes later, Ethan stepped outside. Cold air wrapped around him immediately. The rain had softened. No longer a storm, more like a steady curtain of silver mist drifting across the
Coastline. His truck sat beneath the old cedar tree beside the house. Weathered, reliable, familiar. He climbed inside, started the engine. The headlights cut through the darkness. For a moment, he simply sat there, listening. The hum of the engine, the whisper of rain, the distant crash of waves. Have you ever stood on the edge of a decision you knew would change everything? Not because you wanted it to, but because some paths only appear once.
And if you don't take them, you spend the rest of your life wondering what waited beyond them. Ethan understood that feeling now, more than ever. He glanced once toward the house, then toward the distant lighthouse, and began driving. The road to Blackwater Point followed the coastline. Narrow, winding, lonely. Most people avoided it after sunset, not because it was dangerous, because it felt forgotten, like a road the world had slowly stopped noticing. Rain shimmered across the pavement. The truck's headlights illuminated twisted trees and weathered stone walls. Everything beyond the light disappeared into darkness. Mile after mile passed. The ocean remained beside him, invisible, yet always present, its voice rising and falling beyond the cliffs. Ethan remembered traveling this same road with his father years ago, back when summer seemed endless, back when every mystery felt exciting rather than frightening. A memory surfaced unexpectedly. He was 12 years old, sitting in the passenger seat, his father driving. The windows rolled down, salt air filling the truck. Daniel smiling, pointing toward the lighthouse. You know what's special about that place? Young Ethan had shrugged. What? His father had looked toward the distant tower. It helps people find their way home. Simple words. Yet now, they carried a meaning Ethan had never considered. The rain eased further. The clouds shifted slightly, allowing pale moonlight to touch the ocean. Silver waves stretched endlessly into darkness. Beautiful, lonely, timeless. The farther Ethan drove, the stronger the feeling became. The feeling that something was waiting. Not threatening, not hostile, just waiting, as if tonight had been anticipated for a very long time. Then, something appeared beside the road. A figure, standing near the cliffs. Ethan slammed the brakes. The truck slowed sharply. His heart jumped. The figure remained motionless. Tall, thin, partially hidden by fog. For a brief moment, Ethan thought it might be someone stranded, someone needing help. He rolled down the window slightly. The cold air rushed inside. But before he could speak, the figure vanished. Gone. Nothing there. Only mist drifting across wet grass. Ethan stared, his pulse racing. The roadside was empty, completely empty. A trick of light? A shadow? The fog? Perhaps. Yet something about it felt deliberate, like the road itself was reminding him that ordinary explanations might not be enough tonight. Little did he know, that would not be the last impossible thing he saw before reaching the lighthouse. 10 minutes later, the road curved sharply around the cliffs, and there it was, Blackwater Lighthouse. Closer now, far closer. The towering structure rose above the ocean like a silent guardian. Weathered stone, dark windows, ancient walls scarred by storms. The rotating light shone from its lantern room, bright, steady, impossible, because according to every official record, the lighthouse had been abandoned for 15 years, ever since the night Daniel Carter disappeared during a storm at sea, ever since the night the light went dark, until tonight. Ethan parked near the old access road. The engine fell silent. Only the ocean remained, and the wind, and the distant turning beam above. The sight stole his breath. The lighthouse looked exactly as he remembered, yet somehow older, as though time had moved differently here. The photograph rested inside his pocket. The letters felt heavy against my chest. The night felt alive, watching, waiting, listening. Then, a sound drifted across the wind. Soft, almost impossible to hear. A voice, a man's voice, familiar, heartbreakingly familiar, speaking only 3 words. 3 words Ethan had not heard in 15 years. You're late, son. Ethan froze. The wind stopped. The ocean seemed to fall silent. And at the very top of the lighthouse, a figure appeared inside the lantern room, standing directly behind the glass, watching him. Part 4. The light that shouldn't shine. The figure stood motionless inside the lantern room, high above the crashing ocean, framed by the rotating beam of light, watching, waiting. The wind swept across Blackwater Point, cold, salted, ancient. Yet Ethan barely felt it, because his entire
world had narrowed to that single silhouette. The figure did not wave, did not move, did not call out again. It simply stood there, still as a memory, still as a photograph, still as a ghost. Ethan stared upward, his heart pounding. The distance made details impossible to see clearly, yet something deep inside him already knew. Knew in the same way people recognize a voice they haven't heard in decades. Knew in the same way a child always recognizes home. The shape, the posture, the way the figure rested one hand against the glass. It felt familiar, painfully familiar. The beam rotated again. White light swept across the ocean, across the cliffs, across Ethan's face, then continued into the darkness. When the light returned a few seconds later, the figure was gone. The lantern room stood empty. Ethan inhaled sharply. The sudden absence felt even stranger than the appearance itself. Had someone really been there? Or had the storm and the letters begun playing tricks on his mind? The rational part of him desperately wanted an explanation. A caretaker, a stranger, anyone, anything. But deep down, he already knew what frightened him most. Not that the impossible was happening, but that it might be real. The old path leading to the lighthouse curved upward through tall grass. Moonlight spilled across wet stones. The rain had nearly stopped now. Only a soft mist drifted through the air. The lighthouse stood above him, silent, massive, older than memory. As Ethan began walking, another childhood memory surfaced. He had been 8 years old, small enough to hold his father's hand without embarrassment. They had climbed this same path together. The lighthouse had still been operational then. The lantern had turned every night. Ships had relied on it. People had trusted it. Halfway up the hill, young Ethan had asked, "Dad, do you ever get lonely out here?" Daniel had smiled, looked toward the sea, then answered, "Not when the light is on." At the time, the answer had made little sense. Now, walking toward the impossible glow 15 years later, it felt like a clue. The iron gates surrounding the lighthouse appeared ahead, weathered, rust-covered, locked for years, or at least it should have been. Tonight, it stood open, swaying gently in the wind. A long creak echoed through the darkness. Ethan stopped. A strange feeling settled over him, the sensation that he had crossed some invisible line, that the world behind him was one thing, and the world ahead was something else entirely. Have you ever entered a place that felt different from everywhere around it? Not necessarily dangerous, just separate, as though ordinary rules became uncertain there. The lighthouse grounds felt exactly like that. The air itself seemed different, heavier somehow, full of memory, full of waiting. Beyond the gate, the path continued toward the tower. The stone walls glistened with moisture. The rotating lantern cast long shadows across the ground. Everything looked familiar, yet slightly altered, like a dream recreating a real place from memory. Then Ethan noticed something strange. Footprints, fresh footprints, leading toward the lighthouse door. Only one set, not multiple. One. The prints looked recent, as though someone had entered only minutes ago. The sight sent another chill through him. Someone was here, or had been. He followed the trail slowly. Each step brought him closer to the entrance, closer to answers, closer to whatever waited inside. But before he reached the door, something caught his eye. A wooden bench sat near the cliff edge, old, weathered, covered in years of sea salt and wind. Ethan remembered that bench. His father used to sit there, every summer, every visit. And tonight, something rested on it. A small object, wrapped in cloth, waiting. Ethan approached carefully. The bundle looked old, very old, yet perfectly dry despite the weather. He unwrapped it slowly. Inside lay a pocket watch, silver, beautiful, and instantly recognizable. His breath caught. It belonged to his father. The same pocket watch Daniel carried every day of his life. The same watch that had supposedly been lost at sea during the accident. Ethan picked it up, his hands trembling. The metal felt warm, exactly like the letter, exactly like the envelope. The watch ticked softly. Impossible, because it had been underwater for 15 years. Yet it worked perfectly. Tick, tick, tick. Then Ethan noticed something engraved inside the cover. Words he had never seen before. Words his father must have added sometime before his death.
When the light returns, follow the truth. Ethan stared. Questions multiplied faster than answers. Who placed the watch here? How? Why? And perhaps most importantly, what truth? The lighthouse beam swept across the sea once more. As it passed overhead, something flashed briefly in one of the tower windows. Movement. A shadow. Someone watching again. Ethan looked up quickly. The window was empty, but the feeling remained, the certainty that he was not alone, far from it. The ocean roared below. The wind whispered through the cliffs. And somewhere above, the lantern continued turning, steady, patient, ancient, like a heartbeat. Then another memory surfaced, unexpected, powerful, one Ethan hadn't thought about in years. The last conversation he ever had with his father. Not the final goodbye, the conversation before that.
A week before the accident, Daniel had seemed distracted, thoughtful, as though carrying a secret he couldn't share. At one point, Ethan remembered asking, "Is everything okay?" His father had smiled, but the smile never quite reached his eyes. Then he answered, "If anything ever happens, remember this." Young Ethan had laughed nervously. Remember what? Daniel had looked toward the lighthouse, toward this very lighthouse, and quietly said, "Some lights aren't meant to guide ships." The memory hit Ethan like a wave, because tonight, the lighthouse wasn't guiding ships, it was guiding him. The door to the tower stood only a few feet away now, massive, wooden, ancient. Its brass handle gleamed in the lantern light. Someone had polished it recently, that much was obvious, which meant someone had been here, recently, very recently. Ethan reached for the handle. His pulse thundered in his ears. The photograph remained in his pocket. The letter rested against his chest. The pocket watch ticked softly in his hand. Everything seemed to lead here, to this moment, to this door. But before he touched the handle, a voice spoke behind him. Soft, gentle, heartbreakingly familiar. The voice of a man he had buried 15 years ago. A voice carried across the wind. A voice he would recognize anywhere. It said only one sentence. "Whatever you see inside, don't stop believing." Ethan spun around. No one stood there. Only darkness. Only cliffs. Only ocean. But when he looked back toward the lighthouse door, it was already open, and warm golden light was spilling out from within. Part 5. The Voice Across the Ocean. A lighthouse door stood open, slowly swaying. A warm golden light spilled across the wet stone path. Soft, inviting, impossible. Ethan stared at the entrance, his breath visible in the cold coastal air, his heart pounding so hard he could hear it above the wind. For 15 years, Blackwater Lighthouse had been abandoned. For 15 years, nobody had crossed that threshold. At least, that's what everyone believed. Yet tonight, the tower seemed alive, awake, waiting, and somehow expecting him. The pocket watch ticked softly in his hand. Tick, tick, tick. The sound felt strangely important, like a second heartbeat, like a countdown, or perhaps an invitation. The ocean crashed against the cliffs below. Waves exploded into white foam. The lighthouse beam continued rotating above. Slow, steady, ancient. Ethan stepped toward the doorway. Then another step, and another. Each movement felt heavier than the last, because some part of him feared what he might find inside, and another part feared finding nothing at all. Have you ever hoped for something impossible? Not because you believed it could happen, but because your heart never stopped wanting it. Even after years, even after loss, even after reality told you otherwise. That hope lived inside Ethan. Small, fragile, dangerous. And tonight it had awakened. The moment he crossed the threshold, everything changed. The wind disappeared. The sound of the ocean faded. The cold vanished. Warmth surrounded him instantly. Not ordinary warmth. Something deeper, comforting, familiar, like walking into a childhood memory. The interior of the lighthouse glowed with soft amber light. Oil lamps lined the circular walls. Their flames flickered gently. Impossible. No dust, no decay, no signs of abandonment. The place looked lived in, maintained, loved, as though someone had never left. Ethan slowly closed the door behind him. The latch clicked softly. The sound echoed upward through the tower. A spiral staircase wrapped around the interior wall, disappearing into shadows above. The golden light made everything feel dreamlike, peaceful. Yet beneath that peace, something waited. A mystery, a truth, a revelation 15 years in the making. Then Ethan noticed the
smell, coffee, old books, salt air, and cedarwood, his father's favorite scents. The realization made his chest ache. He moved deeper inside.
Every detail seemed designed to awaken memories. The old coat rack near the entrance, the brass lantern hanging beside the stairs, the worn wooden desk tucked into the corner. Everything exactly where it had always been, as though time had refused to move forward here. Then Ethan froze, because resting on the desk was a coffee mug. Steam rose from it, fresh, warm, recently poured. His pulse quickened. Someone was here. Someone had been here moments ago. But before he could investigate, a sound drifted down from above. Footsteps, slow, measured, coming from the upper levels of the tower. Ethan looked up sharply. The footsteps stopped. Silence followed. Long, heavy, expectant. Then, a voice. The same voice. The voice from outside. The voice from his memories. The voice he had not heard in 15 years. "Dad?" Ethan whispered. Silence. Then, "Ethan." The answer came softly from somewhere above. His knees nearly gave way, because it wasn't similar. It wasn't close. It wasn't a trick of memory. It was exactly the same. Every tone, every inflection, every familiar warmth. His father's voice. The sound shattered something inside him. A wall he had spent years building. A wall made of acceptance, of grief, of moving on. Suddenly tears filled his eyes, before he could stop them, before he could think. Because grief does not disappear. It waits, quietly, patiently, and sometimes one familiar voice is enough to bring it all rushing back. Ethan sat heavily on a nearby chair, his hand shaking. The photograph slipped from his pocket, landing on the desk. For several moments he couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't breathe properly. Then the voice spoke again, gentle, kind, exactly as he remembered. "You kept the photograph." Tears rolled down Ethan's face. The simple observation hit harder than anything else, because it sounded so normal, so ordinary, like the conversation of a father and son separated by a few months, not 15 years. Have you ever imagined one final conversation with someone you lost? Thought about what you would say, what questions you would ask, what feelings you would finally share? Ethan had imagined that conversation countless times. Yet now that the moment seemed real, words failed him. Finally he managed to whisper, "How?" The question echoed upward, simple, yet containing 1,000 others. "How are you here? How is this possible? Why now? Why tonight? How?" The answer didn't come immediately, only silence. Then, "Some questions need time." His father's voice sounded sad, thoughtful, almost weary. "Tonight isn't about answers yet." Ethan wiped his eyes. "Then what is it about?" Another pause, longer this time. Then the voice answered, "Coming home." The words settled into the room, into the walls, into Ethan's heart, and somehow they felt true. A soft sound echoed above, a door opening somewhere higher inside the tower. Golden light spilled down the staircase, brighter than before, warmer, inviting. Then Ethan noticed something else, a melody, faint, drifting through the lighthouse, a song, one he hadn't heard since childhood, a lullaby his father used to hum while driving along the coast, a song Ethan had completely forgotten until this moment. Yet hearing it now, every note returned instantly, every memory attached to it. Summer sunsets, road trips, family dinners, laughter, love. The years seemed to collapse inward, the distance between past and present shrinking, and for the first time since arriving, Ethan stopped feeling afraid. Then something extraordinary happened. The lantern light above brightened. The entire lighthouse seemed to pulse gently, as though responding to the music, responding to memory itself. The air shimmered. Soft golden particles drifted through the room, like dust, like stars, like pieces of forgotten moments. And within those particles, Ethan began seeing images, brief flashes. A little girl holding a seashell, an old sailor writing a letter, a woman standing on a train platform. People, memories, stories, thousands of them, flickering like reflections on water, gone almost instantly, yet unmistakably real. The sight stole his breath. What was this place? What had his father been protecting? And why did it feel connected to every unfinished goodbye in the world? Little did he know.
The true purpose of Blackwater Lighthouse was far stranger than he could possibly imagine. The golden particles slowly faded. The song disappeared. Silence returned. Then something slid gently down the staircase. A letter, a single folded envelope, gliding across the wooden floor, stopping at Ethan's feet. He picked it up carefully. His name was written on the front, again in his father's handwriting. But beneath his name, someone had added another line, a line Ethan had never seen before, a line that made his blood run cold. It read, Delivered from the Shore of Forgotten Goodbyes. Part 6. The Keeper of Lost Messages. For a long moment, Ethan simply stared at the envelope. The words seemed to shimmer in the warm lighthouse light. Delivered from the shore of forgotten goodbyes. A strange phrase. Beautiful, melancholy, impossible. The kind of phrase that felt less like an address and more like a memory, or perhaps a place that existed somewhere between memory and dream. The paper trembled slightly in Ita's hands, not because of wind. There was no wind inside the lighthouse, not because of cold. The room remained comfortably warm. It trembled because his hands were shaking, because every answer seemed to create 3 new questions, and because somewhere above him, his father's voice had spoken, not once, but twice. The grandfather clock in the lighthouse ticked softly, a clock Ethan didn't remember being there before. Its rhythm matched the pocket watch perfectly. Tick, 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 as though both were measuring the same invisible thing, time, or perhaps something beyond time. The lighthouse remained silent. The staircase spiraled upward through golden shadows, waiting, watching. The soft glow from above felt almost alive. Ethan looked toward the upper levels. Dad? No answer, only silence. Yet it didn't feel empty. It felt occupied, as though someone was listening carefully before deciding what to say next. The feeling reminded Ethan of childhood, of sitting beside his father on long drives. Sometimes they would spend miles in silence, comfortable silence, the kind shared by people who don't need constant words. And somehow, tonight's silence felt exactly like that. Carefully, Ethan opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, cream-colored, aged. The handwriting was familiar, but this time it wasn't his father's. The script belonged to someone else, someone older, elegant, precise. The letter read, Mr. Carter, if this message has reached you, then the lighthouse has chosen to awaken once more. Please do not be alarmed. The events of this evening may seem impossible. Many who arrive here feel the same way. You are expected, you are remembered, and you are not the first visitor to cross these waters seeking answers. Please proceed to the lantern room. The keeper will meet you there. Do not lose the photograph. Do not ignore the clock. And above all, listen carefully to the stories. Some of them belong to you. The keeper. Ethan read the message twice, then a third time. The words felt calm, measured, almost reassuring. Yet beneath them lurked mystery. Who was the keeper? How did he know Ethan would come? And what exactly had awakened tonight? The lighthouse, or something much older? Outside, a distant wave crashed against the cliffs. For a moment, the sound seemed unusually loud, as though the ocean itself had moved closer. Listening. Have you ever felt as though a place remembered you? Not recognized you, not welcomed you, remembered you, as though your story had become part of its own? Blackwater Lighthouse felt like that. Every wall, every shadow, every step of the staircase, it all felt strangely familiar, even though Ethan hadn't entered the tower since childhood. He slipped the letter into his coat pocket, picked up the photograph, then finally began climbing. The wooden staircase curved upward around the central shaft. Each step creaked softly beneath his weight. The warm lantern glow followed him, golden circles of light dancing across ancient stone walls. As he climbed higher, the atmosphere changed, not dramatically, subtly. The air seemed thicker somehow, filled with something invisible, like emotion, like memory, like stories waiting to be told. Halfway up the second level, Ethan noticed framed photographs lining the wall, hundreds of them, perhaps thousands, each one carefully preserved, protected, displayed. He stopped, examining the nearest photograph, a young soldier standing beside a train, smiling, holding a letter. The picture looked old, World War II perhaps. Below it rested a brass plaque, engraved with simple words, "He returned home." Because she never stopped writing. Ethan moved to the next photograph, an elderly woman holding a faded postcard, her eyes filled with tears. The plaque beneath read, "Delivered 53 years late." A chill ran through him. He continued walking. Photo after photo, story after story. Lost messages, forgotten letters, delayed reunions, unexpected goodbyes. Every image seemed connected by one thing: communication. Messages. Words that somehow found their way across impossible distances. Then Ethan reached the third level and stopped completely, because the room ahead contained something extraordinary. Shelves. Thousands of shelves, stretching from floor to ceiling, packed with letters. Millions of envelopes, different sizes, different colors, different ages.
an entire library of correspondence. The sight stole his breath. The room felt endless, rows upon rows disappearing into golden shadows, like a cathedral built from human connection, built from hope, built from unfinished conversations. A soft voice spoke behind him. Most people react exactly like that. Ethan spun around, his heart jumping. A man stood near the staircase, tall, elderly, dressed in a dark coat, silver hair, kind eyes, ancient eyes, the sort of eyes that seemed to have watched many lifetimes pass. The man smiled gently, not threatening, not mysterious, simply patient, as though he had been expecting Ethan for a very long time. "You must be the keeper." The old man nodded. "I am." His voice was calm, warm, comforting. Exactly the sort of voice one would expect from someone guarding stories. Ethan glanced around the enormous room. What is all this? The keeper followed his gaze. A soft sadness touched his expression. Messages. The answer seemed too simple, yet somehow perfectly accurate. Messages from where? Ethan asked. The keeper smiled slightly. That depends. He walked toward one of the shelves, ran a hand gently across a row of envelopes. Some were never delivered. Another shelf. Some were lost. Another. Some arrived too late. He paused, looking directly at Ethan. And some cross places ordinary mail cannot reach. Silence filled the room. The implication hung between them. Heavy, beautiful, impossible. The keeper continued walking, his footsteps echoing softly. The world is full of unfinished conversations, Mr. Carter. He stopped beside a nearby shelf. Far more than people realize. Carefully, he selected an envelope, held it up. This one waited 47 years. Another. That one crossed 3 generations. Another. And this one traveled farther than any of them. Ethan stared. Farther where? The keeper's eyes softened. Toward places the living rarely see. The answer sent another chill through him. Yet strangely, it wasn't frightening, only sad and hopeful at the same time. Then the keeper looked toward the photograph in Ethan's hand. His expression changed, became serious, almost concerned. "You brought it." Ethan nodded. "The letter told me to." The keeper stepped closer, examining the image carefully. For the first time, genuine surprise appeared in his eyes. A long silence followed. Then he whispered, "No." Ethan frowned. "What?" The keeper looked up slowly, and for the first time since meeting him, the old man seemed afraid. Because hidden in the corner of the photograph, standing inside the lighthouse window 20 years ago, was the faint image of a young girl. A girl who wasn't supposed to exist. A girl no one had ever noticed before. And beneath her image, someone had written a date. Tomorrow's date. Part 7. Letters never delivered. The room seemed to grow quieter. Not because the lighthouse had fallen silent, but because Ethan's mind had. Every thought, every question, every explanation he had been desperately holding on to, stopped. Because of the photograph. Because of the girl. Because of the impossible date. Tomorrow's date. Written on a picture taken 20 years ago. The keeper stood motionless beside him, his expression pale, his eyes fixed on the image. For several long seconds, neither of them spoke. The endless shelves of letters surrounded them, rows upon rows disappearing into golden shadows. Millions of stories, millions of messages. And somehow, the small photograph in Ethan's hand suddenly felt more important than all of them. Finally, Ethan found his voice. "Who is she?" The keeper didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached carefully for the photograph, examining it beneath the lantern light. The little girl stood near the upper lighthouse window, almost hidden, easy to miss. Perhaps 8 years old. Dark hair, white dress, one hand pressed against the glass, watching, waiting. The image was faint, yet unmistakable, and beneath her figure, a handwritten date. Tomorrow. Not 20 years ago. Tomorrow. The keeper swallowed slowly, then whispered, "That's impossible." The words carried genuine fear, not confusion, not uncertainty, fear. And somehow that frightened Ethan more than anything else. Because until now, the keeper had seemed like someone who understood the impossible, someone accustomed to mysteries, someone who had seen extraordinary things. Yet this image disturbed even him. The warm light flickered softly around them. The shelves remained silent. The ocean rumbled far below the cliffs. And still the photograph waited, holding its secret. Have you ever looked at something ordinary, only to realize it has been hiding a mystery in plain sight for years? A mystery that changes everything the moment you finally notice it? Ethan knew that feeling now, and he hated it, because every answer seemed to move farther away, not closer. The keeper carefully returned the photograph, his expression troubled. "We'll come back to this." Ethan frowned. "That's not an answer." "No," the old man agreed quietly. "It isn't." A pause. "Because I don't have one yet." The honesty surprised him. The keeper sighed, then looked around the enormous room. "Perhaps it's best if you understand what this place is, before we discuss what shouldn't be possible." Ethan folded the photograph carefully, slipped it back into his coat. The image of the girl lingered in his thoughts, watching, waiting. Tomorrow. The keeper began walking deeper into the vast chamber. Ethan followed. The shelves stretched endlessly around them, thousands upon thousands of letters, some new, some ancient, some tied with ribbons, others sealed with wax. Every envelope represented a story, a life, a moment someone wanted to share, or preserve, or never lose. The keeper stopped beside one shelf. "This room exists because people leave things unfinished." He gently removed a weathered envelope. "Most messages reach their destination." A pause. "But some don't." Ethan examined the envelope. The stamp looked decades old, the paper yellow with age. "What happens to them?" The keeper smiled sadly. "Sometimes nothing." Then his expression softened. "And sometimes they find their way here." He handed Ethan the letter. The envelope felt surprisingly warm, just like the one his father had sent. The realization made Ethan uneasy. "Can I read it?" The keeper nodded. "The owner won't mind." Carefully, Ethan unfolded the paper. The handwriting belonged to a young woman. The date at the top read July 14th, 1958. The letter was short, simple, heartbreaking. "Dear Thomas, I waited at the station until midnight. You never came. Maybe you changed your mind. Maybe life got in the way. Maybe this letter won't find you either. But I wanted you to know something. I loved you. I always will. And if somehow you're reading this, I hope your life was beautiful. Love, Eleanor." Ethan stared at the final words. Something about them hurt. Not because of tragedy, because of uncertainty. No ending. No answer. Only a question suspended in time. What happened to them? The keeper smiled sadly. "No one knows." Silence. At least, he glanced upward toward the higher levels of the lighthouse. No one alive. The words settled heavily between them. They continued walking. The keeper shared more stories. A sailor whose final letter never reached his wife. A daughter whose apology arrived 30 years too late. A mother who spent decades writing to a son she'd never met. Every shelf contained heartbreak, hope, love, loss. And somehow, the room never felt depressing. Only human. Profoundly human. Because every story carried the same message beneath it. People wanted to be remembered. People wanted to connect, even across impossible distances. Then they reached a different section of shelves. These letters looked unusual. Their envelopes shimmered faintly, almost glowing beneath the lantern light. Ethan noticed immediately. The keeper noticed him noticing. His expression grew serious. "These are different." Ethan touched one carefully. The paper felt warm. Again, always warm. "What makes them different?" The keeper hesitated, then answered softly. "These arrived after goodbye." The word sent a chill through Ethan. After goodbye. After death. After endings. After impossible things. The implication was clear. These were letters from people who should no longer be able to write. Ethan looked around slowly. Thousands of glowing envelopes. Thousands. The sight stole his breath. How many are there? The keeper glanced toward the endless shelves. More every year. Ethan shook his head. That's impossible. The keeper smiled gently. Most important things are. For several moments, neither spoke. The silence felt respectful somehow, as though the room deserved it. As though
Every letter carried a heartbeat, a memory, a longing. Then Ethan noticed something strange. One shelf stood completely empty. Not partially empty, completely. An entire section, waiting. The keeper saw him looking. His expression darkened slightly. That shelf belongs to messages not yet written. Ethan blinked. What? The old man nodded toward the empty space. It remains reserved. For who? A pause. Then, for tomorrow. The answer sent another wave of unease through him. Tomorrow. Again. The same word. The same impossible reference. The same feeling that everything somehow connected to the photograph, to the girl, to the date, to whatever awaited him beyond midnight. Little did Ethan know, the greatest mystery inside Blackwater Lighthouse was not hidden in the past. It was waiting in the future. And tomorrow had already begun leaving clues behind. The keeper started walking again, toward a narrow corridor hidden behind the shelves, a passage Ethan hadn't noticed before. Dark, silent, ancient. As they approached it, the old man stopped, his face suddenly serious. Very serious. The next room changes people. Ethan frowned. What do you mean? The keeper looked directly into his eyes. Everyone who enters discovers something they were never meant to forget. Silence. The lantern light flickered softly. The ocean rumbled beneath the cliffs. And somewhere above, the lighthouse beam continued turning. Patient, steady, watching. Then a sound drifted from the darkness beyond the corridor. A child's voice. Soft, gentle, and unmistakably familiar. The voice whispered, "He's finally here." Ethan froze, because it was the same voice as the little girl in the photograph. Part 8. The woman waiting since 1958. The child's voice vanished almost as quickly as it had appeared, leaving only silence. Deep, unsettling. The kind of silence that feels full rather than empty. Ethan stood motionless at the entrance to the narrow corridor, his pulse quickening. The words echoed inside his mind. He's finally here. Not someone. Not they. He. As though the speaker had been waiting specifically for him. As though his arrival had been expected. Perhaps even planned. The keeper remained unusually still, his expression thoughtful, concerned, almost cautious. For the first time since meeting him, he seemed uncertain. And that alone made Ethan uneasy, because uncertainty looks strange on the keeper, like fear looks strange on a lighthouse. The warm glow from the letter chamber stretched into the dark corridor, golden light fading gradually into shadow. The air felt different there, older, heavier, filled with stories, filled with memory. Ethan glanced toward the darkness. Did you hear that? The keeper nodded, slowly. I did. You know who it was? The old man hesitated, then sighed. Perhaps. Not exactly reassuring. The answer created more questions than it solved. Again. Always again. Have you ever felt as though life was placing clues in front of you, yet refusing to provide instructions? As though someone had hidden pieces of a puzzle throughout your life and expected you to recognize them when the time came? That was how Ethan felt now. The letters, the lighthouse, the voice, the photograph, the date, the girl. Each clue seemed connected, yet the larger picture remained hidden, just beyond reach. The keeper finally stepped into the corridor. Ethan followed. The narrow passage curved gently through the stone walls of the lighthouse. Old lanterns illuminated the way, their flames burning with soft amber light. No electricity, no wires, just lanterns, and silence. As they walked, Ethan noticed framed letters hanging along the walls. Unlike the thousands stored in the great chamber, these messages had been preserved individually, honored, remembered, each accompanied by a photograph, a story, a life. The keeper stopped beside one frame. A faded black and white photograph showed a young woman standing beside a train station platform, beautiful, hopeful, smiling towards someone outside the frame. Beneath the picture rested a familiar name, Eleanor Parker. Ethan recognized it immediately, the woman whose letter he had read earlier, the one who waited at the station in 1958. the one who never received an answer. The keeper studied the photograph quietly, then spoke. "Would you like to know what happened to her?" Ethan nodded. The old man smiled sadly, then began. Eleanor arrived at the station at 6 o'clock in the evening. The lantern light flickered softly around them. She carried a small suitcase, a pause, and a ring. Ethan listened carefully. The keeper's voice seemed to transform the corridor, the stone walls fading, the years dissolving, the story becoming real. She planned to leave
town with Thomas, the keeper continued. They had fallen in love young. A smile touched his lips, the sort of love people spend entire lives searching for. Outside, the distant ocean whispered against the cliffs. The sound seemed perfectly timed to the story, like background music from another century. Eleanor waited. The keeper's voice softened. 6 o'clock became 7. A pause. 7 became 8. Another pause. And 8 became midnight. Silence. The heartbreak lived inside the silence. No explanation needed. No dramatic words required. Just waiting, and waiting, and waiting. Have you ever waited for someone who never arrived, even if only once? A friend? A loved one? A promise? A dream? There is a particular sadness hidden inside waiting, a sadness that grows quietly, hour by hour, hope fighting reality, until eventually, only acceptance remains. The keeper continued walking. Ethan followed. The corridor seemed endless now, filled with memories, filled with lives. Eleanor never learned why Thomas failed to appear, the old man said. Not while she was alive. Ethan frowned. What happened? The keeper stopped beside another photograph. This one showed a young soldier, uniform, bright eyes, the same eyes Eleanor had been waiting for. Thomas. The keeper sighed. He never abandoned her. Silence. He never changed his mind. A pause. He never received her message. Ethan felt his chest tighten. The old man looked at the photograph, then quietly added, "The train carrying Thomas never arrived." The realization settled slowly, like rain, like grief. Thomas hadn't left. Thomas hadn't betrayed her. He'd simply vanished from her story, and she from his. Two lives separated by circumstances neither understood. What happened to him? Ethan asked. The keeper looked toward the shadows ahead, then answered. He died in an accident 3 days earlier. The words landed heavily. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. The tragedy felt unfair, profoundly unfair. The keeper nodded, as though reading his thoughts. Most unfinished stories are. For a moment, neither spoke. The corridor filled with silence once more. A respectful silence. The kind reserved for old wounds, old love, old sorrow. Then something unexpected happened. The keeper smiled. A genuine smile. Small, warm, hopeful. Eleanor eventually came here. Ethan blinked. To the lighthouse? The keeper nodded. Many years later. A pause. After she passed. The old man's eyes sparkled softly in the lantern light. And do you know what happened? Ethan shook his head. The keeper looked toward one final photograph hanging nearby. A photograph Ethan hadn't noticed before. It showed an elderly woman standing beside a young soldier, holding hands, smiling, together. The image felt impossible, beautiful, peaceful. He finally received her letter. Silence. He wrote back. The keeper's smile deepened, and she stopped waiting. For several seconds, Ethan simply stared. The story wrapped around him like warmth, not because it erased sadness, but because it transformed it, because it offers something grief rarely offers: closure. Tell me in the comments, do you believe unfinished stories ever find their ending? Or do some goodbyes remain unfinished forever? The keeper resumed walking. The corridor slowly widened, the darkness ahead beginning to glow faintly. Blue, silver, moonlight. Something waited beyond, something important. Ethan could feel it. The old man eventually stopped beside a weathered wooden door, ancient, covered with strange symbols, stars, waves, lighthouses, and something else, a child's handprint, small, delicate, familiar, very familiar. The keeper noticed Ethan staring. His expression darkened. The girl again. Ethan nodded slowly. The same handprint from the photograph, the same age, the same mystery, the same impossible presence. The keeper reached for the door handle, paused, then looked directly at Ethan.
"What you're about to see." A long silence followed. The lantern light flickered. The ocean rumbled below. And somewhere far above, the lighthouse beam turned once more. "What you're about to see may change everything you think you know about your father." The words hit Ethan like a wave. Before he could respond, the door slowly opened. And inside the room, a wall covered entirely in photographs became visible. Thousands of photographs, all connected by red thread, all centered around a single image. A photograph of Daniel Carter, standing beside a little girl. The same little girl from the lighthouse window. Part 9. The door behind the lantern room. For a moment, Ethan forgot how to breathe. The room beyond the door seemed frozen in time, silent, still, waiting. The soft silver blue glow illuminated hundreds, no, thousands of photographs. Every wall, every shelf, every inch of visible space.
Covered, connected, linked together by thin strands of red thread. The threads crossed the room like a giant web. A map, a timeline, a mystery. And at the center of it all, one photograph. His father, Daniel Carter, standing beside the little girl. The girl from the lighthouse window. The girl from the impossible photograph. The girl whose voice had whispered from the darkness. The girl who shouldn't exist. Ethan stepped forward slowly, his footsteps barely audible. The keeper remained near the doorway, watching quietly, allowing him to absorb the sight. The room felt sacred somehow. Not religious, not holy, just important. Like a place built around a truth too large to fit anywhere else. The red thread stretched from photograph to photograph, connecting people, places, dates, letters, events, stories. The entire room appeared to document relationships, invisible connections, lives touching other lives, choices shaping destinies. And somehow, the little girl stood at the center of all of it. Ethan approached the central photograph. The image appeared old, perhaps 20 years old, perhaps older. The edges were faded, the colors softened by time. Yet the details remained clear. Daniel Carter stood smiling beside the lighthouse, one hand resting on the shoulder of a young girl. Dark hair, white dress, bright eyes. 8 years old, maybe 9. The same child, no doubt, none. The resemblance was unmistakable. And yet, Ethan had never seen her before. Not once. Not in any family album, not in any memory, not in any story his father ever told. Which made the photograph impossible in a different way. Because Daniel Carter rarely kept secrets. At least, that was what Ethan had always believed. Have you ever discovered something about someone you loved? Something that suggested there were entire chapters of their life you never knew existed? Not because they lied, but because people are always larger than the stories we tell about them. The realization can feel unsettling, like discovering hidden rooms inside a house you've lived in for years. That was exactly how Ethan felt now. Who is she? His voice sounded small inside the room. The keeper didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped closer to the wall, examining the photographs carefully, as though searching for something, or perhaps deciding how much to reveal. Finally, he spoke. "We call her Amelia." Ethan frowned. "Call her?" The old man nodded, "Because we don't know if that's truly her name." Silence. The answer only deepened the mystery. "What do you mean?" The keeper sighed, then pointed towards another photograph. This one showed the same girl standing beside a woman in Victorian clothing. The image looked impossibly old, more than a century old. Yet the child appeared unchanged. The same face, the same eyes, the same age, the same white dress. Ethan stared, his stomach tightening. "No." The keeper nodded slowly. "Exactly." He moved towards another photograph, then another, then another. Each image from a different decade, different era, different generation, yet always the same girl. The dates varied wildly. The child never changed, never aged, never disappeared. Always present, always watching, always connected somehow to the lighthouse, and to certain people, including Daniel Carter. Little did Ethan know, the mystery of Amelia stretched far beyond his father, far beyond the lighthouse, far beyond ordinary understanding. The keeper walked slowly through the room. "The earliest photograph we possess dates back nearly 200 years. Ethan looked towards him sharply. "That's impossible." The old man smiled faintly. "You've said that several times tonight." A pause. "And every time, reality has disagreed." Fair point, though not a comforting one. The keeper stopped beside an enormous map mounted on the wall. Red threads connected dozens of locations. Cities, towns, coastlines, railway stations, harbors,
and every thread eventually led back to Blackwater Lighthouse. The pattern felt deliberate, designed, meaningful. Ethan studied it carefully. What am I looking at? The keeper traced one of the red lines. People who received messages. Another line. People who delivered messages. Another. People who crossed between worlds. The phrase landed heavily. Crossed between worlds. Not metaphorically, not poetically, literally. Ethan could feel it. The lighthouse was more than a building, more than a beacon, more than a mystery. It was a doorway, or perhaps a bridge, a connection between places that should never touch. Then Ethan noticed something unusual. One section of the wall remained covered, hidden beneath a dark cloth. The red threads converged there, more than anywhere else. Dozens, hundreds, possibly thousands, all leading to
the concealed area. The sight immediately drew his attention. The keeper noticed. Of course he did. His expression shifted subtly, becoming cautious, almost protective. What is behind that? Silence. The old man didn't answer. Ethan repeated the question. What is behind the cloth? The keeper looked toward the hidden section, then toward Ethan, then back again. A long pause followed. The kind of pause that reveals more than words. Finally, the reason your father came here. The answer struck like lightning. Everything else disappeared. The photographs, the room, the threads, the lighthouse. Only those words remained. The reason your father came here. Because until now, Ethan had assumed Daniel worked at the lighthouse, visited it, loved it, protected it. But came here? That implied something different. Something intentional. Something secret. What are you saying? The keeper's eyes softened. I'm saying your father wasn't simply a visitor. A pause. He was searching. Silence. For what? The old man looked toward the hidden wall, then whispered. For her. Ethan's gaze immediately returned to Amelia's photograph. The little girl, the impossible child, the one appearing throughout history, the one connected to every mystery, the one whose voice echoed through the lighthouse. His chest tightened. Why? The keeper opened his mouth, prepared to answer, then stopped. Because suddenly, a loud metallic sound echoed from above. Clang. The entire lighthouse trembled slightly. Dust drifted from the ceiling. The lantern light flickered. Both men looked upward. Another sound followed. Clang. This time louder. Closer. As though something enormous had moved inside the upper levels of the tower. The keeper's face immediately changed. Fear. Genuine fear. The same fear Ethan had seen when he noticed the impossible date in the photograph. What was that? The old man didn't answer. Instead, he moved quickly toward the door, far quicker than someone his age should have. The lighthouse trembled again. Clang. Somewhere above, a door had opened, a door that should have remained closed. The keeper looked directly at Ethan, his voice low, urgent. For the first time all night, we have to get to the lantern room. Ethan's pulse quickened. Why? The old man swallowed, then answered with 4 words that changed everything. Because she woke up. Part 10. The first crossing. Major emotional peak. The lighthouse trembled again. Clang. The sound echoed through every stone corridor, through every hidden room, through every shelf of forgotten letters, like a giant bell ringing somewhere deep inside the structure. Calling, warning, awakening. Ethan stood frozen, his pulse racing, his eyes fixed on the keeper, because of the words he had just spoken. She woke up. Not it, not someone. She, Amelia, the impossible girl, the child who appeared in photographs across centuries, the child connected to Daniel Carter, the child whose voice had whispered through the darkness, the child who somehow existed outside ordinary time. The realization settled heavily over him, and before he could ask another question, the lighthouse shook once more, harder this time. The lanterns flickered violently, golden light dancing wildly across the walls. The red threads stretched taut, photographs rattled, frames shifted, and somewhere above, a child laughed, softly, almost playfully,
The sound drifted downward through the tower. Beautiful, innocent, terrifying. The keeper moved immediately. Come. His voice carried urgency now. Real urgency. Not fear, not panic, determination. He stepped into the corridor. Ethan followed. Questions could wait. Whatever was happening, it was already in motion. The narrow passage seemed different now, alive somehow. The stone walls glowed faintly, soft silver light appearing beneath cracks and seams. The air felt warmer, heavier, charged, like the atmosphere before a thunderstorm. The keeper climbed quickly, taking stairs Ethan hadn't noticed before. Hidden stairs, ancient stairs, spiraling upward through the heart of the lighthouse. As they climbed, Ethan noticed something impossible. The walls had changed, or perhaps they were revealing something. Scenes appeared inside the stone, not paintings, not reflections, memories, living memories flowing across the surface like water. A little boy running along a beach, a woman reading a letters, a sailor standing on a distant ship. Hundreds of lives, hundreds of stories, playing silently within the stone itself. Ethan slowed, mesmerized. The keeper didn't. Keep moving, his voice echoed Edward. Don't stop now. Have you ever felt reality begin to bend around you? Not break, not shatter. Simply reveal that it was always larger than you believed. That was what Ethan felt now. Every certainty he carried into Blackwater Lighthouse was dissolving, and in
its place, something extraordinary was emerging. Something beautiful, something frightening, something true. The staircase eventually opened into a circular chamber, the lantern room, the highest point of the lighthouse, the source of the impossible beam. Ethan stepped inside and immediately forgot every question, because the room wasn't what he expected, not at all. There was no lantern, no machinery, no rotating light. Instead, the entire room appeared open to the night sky. Impossible stars stretched above, not through a roof. The roof was gone, or perhaps never existed. The stars seemed closer here, brighter, alive. The ocean stretched infinitely below, far beyond normal distance, far beyond ordinary perspective, as though the lighthouse no longer stood on Earth, or perhaps stood in more than one place at once. The sight stole his breath. At the center of the room stood a pool of silver water, perfectly still, perfectly circular, glowing softly, like liquid moonlight, like melted starlight, like memory given physical form. The keeper approached it carefully, respectfully. Ethan followed. The silver surface reflected not the sky above, but something else entirely. A shoreline, a distant beach, a place neither familiar nor unfamiliar. A place Ethan somehow recognized despite never seeing before. The shore of forgotten goodbyes. The words surfaced instantly. The location mentioned in the letter. The impossible place. The destination. Then the silver water rippled. Once, twice, and a figure appeared within the reflection. A man, standing on the distant shore, watching them, waiting. Ethan froze, his heart stopping, because he knew that face, knew it instantly, knew it better than his own. Daniel Carter, his father. The reflection sharpened. The shoreline became clearer, the waves brighter, the stars more vivid. And there he stood, exactly as Ethan remembered. Not older, not younger. The same kind eyes, the same weathered face, the same gentle smile. 15 years gone, and somehow, standing only a few feet away, separated by nothing more than a surface of silver water. Ethan's knees nearly gave way. Tears filled his eyes instantly, unstoppable, unavoidable. The years collapsed, the grief returned, the love returned, everything returned. Because no matter how old you become, some part of you never stops being a child when you see your parent again, especially after believing you never would. Daniel smiled softly, then raised a hand, the same way he always had, the same casual greeting, the same familiar gesture, and spoke. Ethan. The voice was clear now, not distant, not faint, real, warm, alive. The sound shattered what remained of Ethan's defenses. He stepped forward immediately, toward the silver pool, toward his father, toward the impossible. Dad. The
word escaped broken, barely audible, yet somehow it carried 15 years of longing, 15 years of questions, 15 years of love. Daniel's eyes softened, and for a moment, neither spoke. Because some reunions are too large for words, some emotions exist beyond language. The keeper quietly stepped back, giving them space, giving them time, giving them a moment neither believed possible. Finally, Ethan managed. How? Daniel smiled sadly. The same smile from the letters, the same smile from memory, the same smile from childhood. There isn't enough time to explain everything tonight. A pause. But there is enough time for this. Silence. The stars shimmered overhead. The ocean glowed below. The silver water reflected two worlds touching. And for the first time since arriving, Ethan felt something unexpected. Peace. Not complete, not permanent, but real. Then Daniel's expression changed, became serious, concerned. He glanced towards something behind Ethan, beyond the lantern room, beyond the lighthouse, beyond the night itself. Fear touched his eyes, the first fear Ethan had ever seen there. And suddenly, the moment shifted. The reunion became something else, a warning. Daniel stepped closer to the edge of the silver water, his voice lower now, urgent. Ethan. What? The answer came immediately, without hesitation, without comfort, without preparation. The words struck harder than anything else that night. Harder than the letters, harder than the photographs, harder than the impossible reunion itself. Because Daniel Carter looked directly into his son's eyes and said, Amelia isn't what we thought she was. The silver water suddenly erupted with light. The lighthouse shook violently, and from somewhere beneath the ocean, a child's voice whispered, He finally knows. Part 11. The Shore of Forgotten Goodbyes. The silver water exploded into ripples. Light surged across the lantern room. The stars above seemed to stretch, bend, shift, as though the night sky itself
had taken a breath. Ethan staggered backward. The lighthouse trembled beneath his feet. The keeper gripped a nearby railing. The glow from the pool intensified until the entire room became silver, white, brilliant. And somewhere beneath the roar of light, the child's voice laughed, softly, almost sadly. He finally knows. The words echoed through the tower, through the ocean, through Ethan's heart. Then, everything went silent. Silence. Not ordinary silence. Complete silence. The kind that exists only in dreams, or deep underwater, or somewhere beyond the edges of the world. Ethan blinked. The lantern room was gone. The lighthouse was gone. The keeper was gone. The silver pool was gone. Only the stars remained. Endless stars, brighter than any sky he had ever seen. Closer, warmer, alive. They stretched across a vast darkness overhead. Not cold darkness, comforting darkness, peaceful darkness, like the space between heartbeats. Ethan looked down. Soft sand rested beneath his feet. Silver sand, glowing faintly. The shoreline extended endlessly in both directions. Waves rolled gently onto the beach, their foam shimmering with starlight. Each wave carried faint voices, whispers, memories, fragments of conversations, goodbyes, promises, apologies, laughter. The ocean itself seemed made from human stories. And suddenly Ethan understood, without anyone explaining, without anyone telling him. This was the place, the destination hidden inside the letters, the place mentioned by the keeper, the place written on the envelope, the shore of forgotten goodbyes. The realization settled over him like a blanket. Strange, yet somehow natural, as though a part of him had always known this place existed, waiting quietly somewhere beyond the horizon, waiting beyond loss, beyond endings, beyond time. The stars reflected across the water,
millions upon millions, every reflection perfectly still, perfectly clear, as if the ocean remembered every night sky that had ever existed. Have you ever wondered where unfinished conversations go? Not the words we speak, the words we don't, the apologies we never make, the love we never express, the questions we never ask, the goodbyes we never get to say. What if they don't disappear? What if they gather somewhere, waiting patiently for the moment they're finally heard? A familiar voice spoke behind him. Beautiful, isn't it? Ethan turned immediately. Daniel Carter stood several feet away. His father. Not a reflection, not a vision, not a distant image within silver water. Standing there, real, solid, smiling. The sight hit Ethan even harder this time, because now there was no barrier between them. No pool, no distance, no separation. Just father and son, face to face, after 15 years. Neither moved at first, neither spoke. Some moments are too large for language, too important, too fragile. The waves rolled softly across the silver shoreline. The stars watched overhead, and time itself seemed to pause. Finally, Ethan stepped forward, then another step, then another, until only a few feet remained between them. His eyes filled with tears again, the same tears he thought he had already cried, the same grief he thought he had already survived. Because grief never truly leaves. It simply waits quietly beside love. Daniel smiled gently. Hello, son. The words broke something inside Ethan. Not painfully, beautifully. He laughed. A shaky laugh. A broken laugh. A relieved laugh. All at once. Then finally managed. Hi, Dad. The simplest greeting. The hardest greeting. The one he never believed he would speak again. Daniel opened his arms, and Ethan embraced him. Immediately. Without hesitation. Without doubt. The hug lasted a long time. Longer than either expected. Longer than words required. Because some reunions deserve silence. Because some emotions cannot be translated. And because for 15 years Ethan had dreamed of exactly this moment. The warmth felt real. The heartbeat felt real. Everything felt real. More real than reality. When they finally stepped apart, neither tried hiding their tears. There was no reason to. No pride. No embarrassment. Only honesty. Only love. Only time reclaimed. Daniel looked older somehow. Not physically. Emotionally. Like someone who had carried enormous responsibility. Enormous sorrow. Enormous hope. His eyes still held kindness. Still held warmth. But now they held something else too. Weariness. The kind that comes from waiting. A very long time. I missed you. Ethan said it quietly. Like a confession. Like a prayer. Daniel nodded. I know. A pause. I missed you too. The answer carried enough sincerity to hurt and heal at the same time. They began walking along the shoreline. The waves glowed around their feet. The stars reflected endlessly across the water.
Water. The entire place felt suspended outside existence, outside history, outside time. As though every lost memory eventually drifted here. Every unfinished goodbye. Every unresolved story. Every lingering piece of love. Then Ethan noticed something strange. People. Farther down the shoreline, hundreds of them, perhaps thousands, standing, walking, talking, waiting. Not ghosts, not spirits. People. Real. Each carrying letters, photographs, objects, memories. The sight was breathtaking and heartbreaking at once. Daniel followed his gaze. They come here for closure. Ethan stared. So all of them, the answer came gently, are looking for someone. Silence. The truth felt enormous, because suddenly Ethan realized he wasn't unique. His pain wasn't unique. His longing wasn't unique. Every person on the shoreline carried the same burden. Love interrupted, stories unfinished, conversations paused too soon. Little did he know, one of those stories was about to change everything. As they walked farther, a woman appeared ahead, elderly, elegant, holding a folded letter, her eyes bright with tears, yet smiling. Beside her stood a young man in a military uniform, the same young man from the photograph, Thomas, and the woman, Eleanor, The woman from 1958. The woman who had waited at the station. The woman whose letter never arrived. Ethan stopped, the keeper's story suddenly becoming real. They stood together now, talking softly, laughing, their hands intertwined. Decades of waiting finally over. The sight filled Ethan with unexpected hope. Tell me in the comments, if you could have one final conversation with someone you miss, what would you say? The stars shimmered overhead. The shoreline stretched endlessly. The ocean whispered forgotten stories. And for the first time since arriving, Ethan felt something deeper than mystery. Hope. Real hope. The kind grief rarely allows. Then Daniel suddenly stopped walking. His expression changed. The warmth faded. Concern returned. He looked toward the distant horizon, toward something Ethan couldn't yet see. Fear touched his face. Real fear. Dad? Daniel didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stared into the distance. The stars above dimmed slightly. The waves slowed. Even the shoreline seemed to grow quieter. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. She's coming. Ethan's stomach tightened, because he already knew who Daniel meant. Amelia, the impossible girl, the child who appeared throughout history, the child connected to every mystery, the child who somehow terrified even the dead. Then far across the glowing shoreline, a small figure appeared, a girl in a white dress, walking slowly toward them. And as she approached, the stars above her began going dark, one by one. Part 12. The boy searching for his mother. The stars began disappearing, one by one. Not exploding, not falling, simply fading, as though someone were gently extinguishing candles across the heavens. The effect was subtle at first, a single star vanishing near the horizon, then another, then 3 more. Yet the darkness spread steadily, silently, following the path of the girl in white, Amelia, walking toward them across the shore of forgotten goodbyes. The waves continued rolling onto the silver sand, but even they seemed quieter now, more cautious, as if the ocean itself recognized her presence. Daniel stood motionless beside Ethan, watching, waiting, concern visible in his eyes. The sight unsettled Ethan more than Amelia herself, because his father wasn't easily frightened, never had been. Not when storms swallowed the coastline, not when fishing boats vanished in rough seas, not when life became difficult. Yet, Amelia made him afraid. The girl continued approaching, slowly, patiently. Her white dress drifted softly in the ocean breeze. Her dark hair moved gently around her shoulders. From a distance, she looked ordinary, completely ordinary, just a child. And perhaps that was what made her so unsettling, because everything about her appearance contradicted everything surrounding her. The darkening stars, the impossible photographs, the centuries of mystery, the whispers in the lighthouse, the fear she inspired. Nothing about those things belonged to an ordinary child. Who is she really? Ethan asked quietly. Daniel's gaze remained fixed on the distant figure. For a moment, Ethan thought he wouldn't answer. Then finally, we spent a long time asking the wrong question. Silence. The waves whispered along the shore. The stars continued fading, one by one. What does that mean? Daniel sighed. A weary sound, a tired sound, the sound of someone carrying a burden for years. Everyone wants to know who Amelia is. A pause. When the better question is, his expression darkened. What is she? The words settled heavily between them.
Ethan looked again toward the approaching girl, still walking, still calm, still smiling faintly. Nothing about her appeared threatening, yet something deep inside him felt uneasy. Not because she seemed dangerous, because she seemed ancient, older than the shoreline, older than the lighthouse, older than memory itself. Before Ethan could ask another question, a voice called from farther down the beach. A young voice, desperate, hopeful, searching. Dad! Both Ethan and Daniel turned. A small boy was running along the shoreline, perhaps 10 years old, thin, dark-haired, wearing a blue sweater. His eyes scanned the crowds anxiously, looking, searching, hoping. The sight immediately tugged at Ethan's heart, because he recognized that look. The look of someone missing a piece of themselves, the look of someone searching for someone they love. The boy slowed as he approached, breathing hard, looking from face to face, person to person, still searching, still hoping. Finally, his shoulders slumped slightly. Disappointment, again, not finding who he wanted, not yet. Daniel watched quietly, then smiled softly. His name is Oliver. Ethan looked toward him. You know him? Daniel nodded. A little. The answer felt familiar, the same way the keeper knew everyone, the same way the lighthouse seemed to know stories. Oliver stopped several yards away, staring at the ocean. The loneliness in his expression felt far too old for someone his age, too heavy, too practiced.
as though he'd been carrying it for years. Have you ever seen a child trying to be brave? Truly brave? Not pretending, actually brave? The sight is both inspiring and heartbreaking, because courage looks different in children. Softer, more honest, more vulnerable. Oliver looked exactly like that. Ethan eventually approached him, carefully, gently. The boy glanced up, suspicion flickering briefly before fading. "Hi." Ethan offered a small smile. The boy returned a tiny nod. "Hi." Silence followed, the comfortable kind. The kind strangers sometimes share when they recognize sadness in each other. Finally, Ethan asked, "Who are you looking for?" Oliver stared toward the ocean, then answered quietly, "My mom." The words felt heavier than they should have been, perhaps because of where they were, perhaps because of how he said them. Not dramatically, not emotionally, simply honestly. "My mom." Ethan sat beside him on a smooth piece of silver driftwood. The waves shimmered nearby. The stars reflected across the water, though fewer now, always fewer. Amelia continued approaching in the distance, yet somehow she seemed farther away, as though the shoreline itself stretched around her. "How long have you been looking?" The question escaped before Ethan realized it. Oliver thought for a moment, then shrugged. "I'm not sure." A pause. Time works weird here. The answer surprised Ethan. Then again, nothing about tonight followed ordinary rules. The boy pulled something from his pocket, a folded photograph, worn, creased, loved. He handed it to Ethan. The picture showed a smiling woman holding a much younger Oliver, perhaps 4 years old, maybe 5. The resemblance was obvious, his mother. The photograph had been folded so many times the edges were beginning to tear. Ethan handled it carefully. "She's beautiful." Oliver smiled, a genuine smile, the first one. "Yeah." A pause. "She used to sing when I couldn't sleep." Silence. The memory lingered between them, warm, painful, precious. "What happened?" The question came softly. Oliver looked toward the ocean again, toward the endless horizon, then answered. "She got sick." The words landed quietly. No drama, no anger, no bitterness. Just truth. Simple truth. The hardest kind. Ethan didn't know what to say. Sometimes there are no perfect words. Only presence, only listening, only understanding. So that's what he offered. And for a while they simply sat together, watching the waves, watching the stars, watching the impossible shoreline. Then something extraordinary happened. A woman appeared farther down the beach, walking slowly through the silver mist, carrying a lantern. The moment Oliver saw her, he froze. His entire body went still. The photograph slipped from his hands, falling into the sand. For several seconds he couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Then, "Mom?" Barely a whisper, yet somehow louder than the ocean. The woman stopped, turned, and smiled. The exact smile from the photograph. The exact smile Oliver remembered. The exact smile he'd spent countless nights missing. The lantern glowed warmly beside her, illuminating tears already forming in her eyes. "Oliver!" The boy stood immediately. The world seemed to disappear around him. The shoreline, the stars, the waves, everything fading into the background. Only
Mother and son remained, separated by distance. Then no distance at all. Oliver ran. The woman ran too. And seconds later they embraced. Tightly, desperately, beautifully. The sort of reunion that reminds you why hope exists, why love matters, why some stories deserve another chapter. Ethan looked away briefly, overcome. The emotion too powerful, too pure, too real. Daniel stood beside him once more, watching the reunion quietly, a gentle smile touching his face. Then he said something Ethan would never forget. "Love is the strongest thing that crosses between worlds." Silence followed, the truth settling softly into the night. Little did Ethan know, the reunion unfolding before him wasn't the reason Oliver mattered. Not even close. Because moments later, the boy's mother looked toward Amelia, and her face filled with absolute terror. The lantern fell from her hands, and she whispered, "No." The word trembled, shattered, afraid. Then she looked directly at Ethan and said, "She found another Carter."
Part 13. The Girl Who Appeared in Every Century. The lantern struck the silver sand. Its warm glow flickered wildly, then steadied. But the woman did not. She stood frozen, one hand gripping Oliver's shoulder, the other trembling visibly. Her eyes remained locked on the distant shoreline, locked on Amelia, locked on the small figure walking beneath the darkening stars.
And for the first time since Ethan had arrived at the shore of forgotten goodbyes, he saw genuine terror. Not confusion, not uncertainty. Terror. The kind that comes from recognizing something you hoped never to see again. The waves continued rolling softly onto the beach, yet the shoreline felt different now. Tense. Expectant. The stars above Amelia continued fading one by one, entire constellations disappearing into darkness. The effect spread slowly across the heavens, like ink soaking through paper. Beautiful. Wrong. Impossible. Oliver looked up at his mother, concern replacing joy. Mom? She barely seemed to hear him. Her attention remained fixed on Amelia, the child in white, the impossible girl. Then she repeated the words, more quietly this time, as though speaking a nightmare aloud. She found another Carter. Ethan felt his stomach tighten. What does that mean? The woman looked toward him slowly. Recognition flickered across her face. Not surprise. Recognition. As though she had expected him eventually. Expected this moment. Expected this conversation. Her eyes settled on him, and for several long seconds she simply stared, studying him, evaluating him, almost mourning him. Finally she spoke. You have his eyes. Ethan blinked. My father's? She nodded. Exactly like Daniel. The words carried sadness and memory, a history Ethan didn't understand. Not yet. Daniel stood nearby, watching, listening, his expression unreadable, as though he already knew what was coming. Perhaps he did. Perhaps everyone here understood more than Ethan. Everyone except the person at the center of the mystery. Have you ever entered a story halfway through? A conversation? A family history? A mystery? A place where everyone else seems to know something you don't? The feeling can be frustrating, disorienting, lonely. That was exactly how Ethan felt now. Every answer remained just beyond reach, every truth hidden behind another truth. The woman gently guided Oliver beside her, then looked back toward Amelia. Still approaching, still walking, still smiling faintly, always smiling. The sight seemed to trouble her more than anything else. Finally she said, My name is Rebecca. Ethan nodded. She took a breath, gathering herself, then continued. I arrived here 12 years ago. A pause, or maybe 50. She laughed softly, without humor. Time doesn't behave normally near her. Her. Amelia. Again. Everything returned to Amelia. Always Amelia. Rebecca glanced toward Daniel. He offered a small nod. Permission? Encouragement? Or perhaps acceptance? Then she looked back at Ethan and began. The first recorded sighting happened in 1819. The shoreline seemed to grow quieter, even the waves listening. At least, she corrected herself. The first recorded sighting we know about. A pause. A lighthouse keeper in Nova Scotia reported seeing a young girl standing on the rocks during a storm. The stars flickered overhead, dimming further. Rebecca's voice remained steady. She appeared after 3 sailors disappeared. Silence. Then vanished. Another wave rolled onto the silver sand, carrying distant whispers, forgotten names, lost promises, unfinished goodbyes. Rebecca continued. 20 years later, she appeared again. A pause. Different country. Another pause. Same face. Ethan's chest tightened, because he already knew what came next. The impossible photographs. The unchanging child. The centuries. Still, hearing it spoken aloud made it feel more real, not less. Then again, Rebecca's eyes followed Amelia's distant figure. And again, another pause. And again, the repetition felt deliberate, heavy, like footsteps, like a countdown, like fate. Every generation, Rebecca whispered. Every century,
The words hung in the air, motionless, unavoidable. She appears. Silence. Someone disappears. Longer silence. Stories change. The longest silence yet. And eventually, her voice grew quieter. A Carter becomes involved. Ethan froze. The shoreline seemed colder suddenly. The waves more distant. The stars dimmer. What? Rebecca nodded slowly. As far back as our records go. A pause. The Carter family always appears. Daniel looked toward the ocean, not denying it, not confirming it, simply listening. Little did Ethan know, the connection between Amelia and the Carter family stretched far deeper than anyone had told him, far deeper than Daniel himself understood. Ethan struggled to process everything. My family? Rebecca nodded. Generation after generation. A pause. Always nearby. Another. Always connected. The idea
Felt impossible. And yet, everything tonight had felt impossible. That argument no longer carried much weight. Oliver remained close to his mother now, holding her hand, listening quietly. The reunion already fading into something larger, something darker, something more important. Rebecca eventually reached into her coat pocket, removing a small object. An old photograph. Very old. The edges worn. The image faded. She handed it to Ethan. Carefully. Reverently. Like something sacred. Ethan examined it. His breath caught immediately. Because he recognized the people. Or at least one of them. Amelia stood in the center. Of course she did. Unchanged. Unaging. Watching the camera. Watching him. Watching history. But beside her stood a man. A young man. The resemblance struck instantly. The same eyes. The same jaw. The same posture. A Carter. Without question. The date beneath the photograph read, 1847. Ethan stared, then looked up. Rebecca nodded. Your ancestor. Silence. One of many. The realization settled heavily. His family wasn't simply connected to Amelia. His family had been connected to her for nearly 2 centuries. Maybe longer. And nobody knew why. The stars above dimmed further. Entire sections of sky now missing. The darkness spreading steadily. Following Amelia. Always following Amelia. Then Daniel finally spoke. His voice calm. Measured. Heavy with memory. She doesn't choose people. Everyone looked toward him. Even Rebecca. Even Oliver. The shoreline itself seemed to listen. Daniel's eyes remained fixed on Amelia. Then he quietly corrected himself. At least, a pause. We thought she didn't. The words sent another chill through Ethan. Because Daniel sounded uncertain. And uncertainty had become terrifying. Then something happened. Something nobody expected. Amelia stopped walking. Far out on the shoreline. Motionless. The darkness above stopped spreading. The stars froze. The ocean fell silent. Everything paused. Waiting. Slowly. Very slowly. The girl lifted one hand and pointed directly at Ethan. Not vaguely. Not generally. Directly. Unmistakably. The moment she did, every photograph in Ethan's coat pocket suddenly became warm. The picture of his father. The hidden note. The impossible image. All of them. Heating instantly. Almost burning. Ethan pulled the photograph from his pocket and immediately felt his blood run cold.
because the image had changed. Again, the girl still stood in the lighthouse window, but she was no longer alone. A second figure now stood beside her. A man, watching the camera, watching Ethan. A man who hadn't been there before. A man who looked exactly like Ethan himself. And beneath the photograph, a new message had appeared, written in fresh ink, words that hadn't existed moments earlier. The next crossing begins at midnight. Part 14. The lighthouse that waited for 40 years. The photograph trembled in Ethan's hands, or perhaps his hands were trembling. It was impossible to tell. The silver shoreline stretched endlessly around him. The stars above remained frozen, half visible, half gone, as though the night itself had paused to witness what came next. And there in the photograph stood Ethan, beside Amelia, inside the lighthouse window. A moment that had not happened, a memory that did not exist, yet somehow appeared on paper, waiting, recorded, as though the future had already happened somewhere else. The message beneath the image seemed darker than ordinary ink, fresh, sharp, deliberate. The next crossing begins at midnight. The words refused to leave his mind. A crossing. Another crossing. Not the one that brought him here. Something new. Something larger. Something waiting. Around him, nobody spoke. Not Daniel. Not Rebecca. Not Oliver. Because everyone understood the significance. Even if they interpreted it differently. The silence stretched. Long. Heavy. Meaningful. Finally, Ethan looked toward his father. What does it mean? Daniel's expression tightened. Not because he lacked an answer. Because he had one. And didn't want to give it. Have you ever asked a question and immediately known you wouldn't like the answer? The moment before someone responds. The moment when truth stands just outside the door. Waiting. That was exactly how Ethan felt. Daniel looked toward the ocean, toward the distant horizon, toward memories only he carried, then quietly said, "Midnight is when the lighthouse opens completely." The words landed softly, yet they carried enormous weight. Ethan frowned. To what? Daniel didn't answer immediately. Instead, Rebecca did. Her voice almost a whisper. Everything. The shoreline seemed colder suddenly. The stars dimmer. The waves farther away. Everything. Not a place. Not a destination. Everything. Oliver squeezed his mother's hand tighter. Clearly uncomfortable. Clearly familiar with this conversation. Rebecca noticed.
Gently brushed his hair aside, offering reassurance. The gesture reminded Ethan of his own childhood, of simple moments, ordinary moments, the kind people rarely appreciate until they're gone. Daniel eventually continued. The lighthouse was never built to guide ships. Ethan remembered those words, his father's words, years ago. Some lights aren't meant to guide ships. Suddenly, the memory felt different, less like philosophy, more like a warning. The lighthouse was built to guide crossings. Daniel's gaze remained fixed on the horizon. Messages. A pause. Memories. Another. People. Silence followed. The ocean whispered quietly. The stars shimmered faintly. And Ethan felt reality shifting once again. The first keepers discovered something, Daniel said. Long before any of us. A pause. Long before Blackwater Point even existed. The shore seemed to grow quieter. Listening. Waiting. There are places where worlds overlap. His voice softened. Briefly. A pause.
Rarely. Another. But they exist. Ethan listened carefully, every word feeling important, every sentence another piece of the puzzle. The lighthouse sits on one of those places. The realization settled slowly, like snowfall, like grief, like truth. Everything connected back to the lighthouse. Everything. The letters, the voices, the photographs, the shore, Amelia, all of it. Little did Ethan know, the most important part of the story hadn't happened yet. Not even close. Rebecca stepped closer, her expression thoughtful, sad, as though remembering something painful. My grandfather told me a story once. Everyone turned toward her, even Daniel. The waves rolled softly across the silver beach. The stars remained frozen overhead. And Rebecca began. 40 years ago, her voice drifted across the shoreline. A lighthouse keeper disappeared. No storm. Another. No accident. Another. No explanation. Silence. He simply vanished. The story immediately captured Ethan's attention, because every mystery seemed to matter here. Every story connected somehow. The search lasted weeks. Rebecca continued. Nothing was found. A pause. Then, 40 years later, she swallowed. He came back. Even the waves seemed to pause. Ethan frowned. What? Rebecca nodded slowly. He walked back into town. Silence. The same age. Another silence. The same clothes. A third. The same day. The words felt impossible. Yet impossibility had become almost ordinary tonight. He believed he'd been gone for 3 hours. Rebecca's eyes reflected starlight. But 40 years had passed. The shoreline fell silent once more, because everyone understood what that meant. The lighthouse didn't simply connect places. It connected time. Ethan looked toward Daniel. His father didn't deny it, didn't question it, which somehow made it worse. What happened to him? Ethan asked. Rebecca smiled sadly. The same thing that happens to everyone who crosses. A pause. He spent the rest of his life trying to understand what he'd seen. The ocean whispered against the silver sand. Far away, Amelia remained motionless, watching, waiting, patient, always patient. Then Oliver spoke unexpectedly, his voice small, quiet, yet somehow powerful. She isn't the reason people disappear. Everyone looked toward him. Even Rebecca seemed surprised. The boy rarely interrupted, rarely volunteered information. Yet now his gaze remained fixed on Amelia. What do you mean? Ethan asked gently. Oliver hesitated, then answered. Everybody thinks she's the cause. A pause. But she isn't. The stars above flickered faintly. The darkness shifted. Listening. Oliver swallowed, then said the words that changed everything. She's looking for something. Silence. Absolute silence. Because nobody had considered that possibility. Not truly. Not seriously. Ethan stared at the boy. What is she looking for? Oliver's expression darkened. The innocence faded briefly, replaced by something older, something wiser, something he shouldn't have known. Then he whispered, her way home. The words drifted across the shore, carried by starlight, carried by memory, carried by something ancient. Far across the beach, Amelia smiled. For the first time, directly at Ethan. And the moment she smiled, the ocean behind her split open. Not dramatically, not violently, silently. A vast doorway appearing beneath the waves. A doorway made entirely of light.
And standing inside that doorway was a second lighthouse, far larger than Blackwater, far older, and somehow waiting specifically for Ethan. Part 15. The Lighthouse Beyond Time. Major emotional peak. The ocean opened without a sound. No crashing waves, no thunder, no explosion of light, only stillness. The water simply moved aside, as though responding to a command older than the sea itself. And beneath the divided ocean, the second lighthouse emerged. Vast, ancient, impossible. Its tower rose far beyond the stars, beyond clouds, beyond distance. Its stone appeared carved from
moonlight and memory. From forgotten dreams and unfinished stories, the sight stole every remaining word from Ethan. Nobody spoke. Not Daniel, not Rebecca, not Oliver, because there was nothing to say. Some mysteries are too large for language, too large for explanation, too large for understanding. And this was one of them. The giant lighthouse stood beyond the divided sea, its beacon rotating slowly through the darkness, not shining outward, shining inward, toward itself, toward some hidden center, toward a truth buried deep inside existence. The light moved across the shore of forgotten goodbyes, touching the silver sand, touching the stars, touching Ethan. And the moment it reached him, something happened. A memory surfaced. Not his memory, someone else's. Someone ancient, someone forgotten. He stood inside a stone chamber. Rain hammered against distant windows. A young girl sat beside a fire. Dark hair, white dress. Amelia. Yet different somehow. Not mysterious, not frightening. Simply lonely. Very lonely. She couldn't have been more than 8 years old. The memory felt painfully real. Every detail sharp. Every emotion alive. The girl stared into the fire, holding a small wooden toy, waiting, watching the door, as though expecting someone, as though hoping. Then another memory appeared, a different moment, a different century. The same girl, standing alone beside a shoreline, crying, calling out for someone, the wind stealing her voice, the waves swallowing her words. Yet she continued calling, again, and again, and again. Then another memory, and another, and another. Hundreds, thousands, fragments of a life scattered across centuries. Always the same child, always searching, always waiting, always alone. The visions ended, abruptly, leaving Ethan breathless, overwhelmed, heartbroken, because something inside those memories felt familiar. Not the events, the emotion, the loneliness, the longing, the grief. Have you ever seen pain so deep it changes the way you view someone? A person you feared, a person you misunderstood, a person you judged. Then suddenly, you see the wound beneath the mystery, and everything changes. That was what happened to Ethan. For the first time, he stopped seeing Amelia as a threat and started seeing her as a child carrying centuries of loneliness. The giant lighthouse continued glowing beyond the ocean. The stars trembled overhead, and Amelia finally spoke. Her voice carried effortlessly across impossible distance. Soft, gentle, almost sad. Ethan. The sound silenced the shore itself. The waves stopped moving. The wind disappeared. Even the stars seemed to listen. She stepped forward, the divided ocean illuminating her white dress, the ancient lighthouse glowing behind her. And for the first time, Ethan truly looked into her eyes. Not at her, into her. What he saw shattered him, because inside those eyes lived centuries, not metaphorically, literally. He saw people, memories, goodbyes, entire lives reflected within them. Millions of moments, millions of stories, millions of lost conversations. And beneath all of it, one emotion, one overwhelming emotion. Loneliness.
Not ordinary loneliness, not spending an evening alone, not missing someone, something far deeper, the loneliness of being left behind by time itself. Amelia smiled sadly, a heartbreaking smile, the smile of someone who had stopped expecting rescue long ago. Then she asked, "Do you know what it feels like to wait?" The question drifted across the shore. Simple, yet enormous. Ethan couldn't answer, because somehow he did know. Not completely, not like her, but enough. Enough to understand, enough to feel it. Daniel stepped forward suddenly, his expression filled with sorrow. Amelia. The name sounded different coming from him. Not fearful, not cautious, compassionate. The girl looked toward Daniel, and for a brief moment, the centuries vanished. She looked exactly like what she appeared to be, a child, nothing more. "You promised." Her voice trembled, the words barely audible, yet they hit Daniel like a physical blow. Ethan looked sharply toward his father. Daniel lowered his eyes, unable to meet hers. The silence that followed felt enormous, heavy, painful. "You promised you'd help me," Amelia whispered. The stars above flickered. The divided ocean glowed brighter. And suddenly Ethan realized something. Daniel knew her, not as a mystery, not as a legend. Personally, the realization struck hard, because it changed everything. Again, what is she talking about? Ethan asked. Daniel didn't answer immediately, his face filled with regret. Old regret, deep regret, the kind people carry for decades. Finally, he looked at his son, and Ethan saw tears in his father's eyes. For the first time, "I met her." The confession emerged quietly, broken.
Honest. Silence. Absolute silence. When I was young, a pause. Before you were born, another. I crossed. The shore seemed to darken around them. Listening. Remembering. Daniel looked toward Amelia, then continued. I found the second lighthouse. A pause. And I found her waiting there. The ancient tower beyond the ocean glowed brighter, responding somehow, remembering. I promised I'd help her get home. Daniel's voice cracked, the guilt inside it impossible to hide. Amelia lowered her gaze. The sight hurt more than anger would have, more than accusation, more than blame, because disappointment is often heavier than fury. What happened? Ethan whispered. Daniel closed his eyes briefly, then answered. The answer changed everything. I failed. Silence. The word echoed across the shore, across the stars, across centuries. I came back. His voice shook. She couldn't. A pause. I left her there. Another. And she's been waiting ever since. The truth settled over the shore like snowfall. Quiet. Gentle. Devastating. Amelia stood motionless, the ancient lighthouse glowing behind her, the stars dim around her, the ocean divided beneath her feet. And suddenly Ethan understood. She wasn't haunting the world. She wasn't hunting people. She wasn't causing the crossings. She was searching, still searching, after centuries, for the one thing she'd never found, a way home. Tears rolled down Amelia's face. Silent tears. The saddest tears Ethan had ever seen, because they carried hundreds of years of waiting, hundreds of years of hope, hundreds of years of disappointment. Then she looked directly at Ethan and whispered, "You're the last Carter." The words felt wrong immediately, terrifying, final. Before Ethan could respond, the giant lighthouse beyond the ocean suddenly erupted with brilliant light. The divided sea began closing. The stars started disappearing rapidly, and a deep voice echoed from inside the ancient tower. A voice older than memory itself. A voice that had been silent for centuries. It spoke only 6 words. The gate opens at midnight. Part 16. The child lost between worlds. The words rolled across the heavens. The gate opens at midnight. Not shouted, not spoken loudly, yet every star heard them. Every wave heard them. Every memory upon the shore of forgotten goodbyes heard them. The voice seemed woven into existence itself. Ancient, patient, certain. And after it faded, silence followed. A silence so complete it felt sacred. The divided ocean began moving. Slowly, the immense walls of water drifting toward one another. Not crashing, not violent, almost gentle, as though the sea regretted closing, as though it understood what waited beyond. The colossal lighthouse remained visible, its impossible beacon rotating through the darkness, watching, waiting, calling. Amelia stood motionless, silver tears glimmering on her cheeks. For the first time since Ethan met her, she didn't look mysterious. She didn't look frightening. She looked tired. The sort of tiredness that comes after waiting too long, after hoping too long, after carrying sorrow longer than anyone should. Daniel lowers his head, unable to look at her. The guilt surrounding him felt almost visible. A weight, a wound, a promise broken decades earlier. And perhaps a promise broken for centuries. Ethan looked between them. Questions filled his mind. Yet one mattered more than all the others. One question sat at the center of everything. What happened to her? The words emerged softly, carefully, almost afraid of the answer. Amelia looked up, meeting his gaze. And for a brief moment, the stars reflected inside her eyes. Entire galaxies, entire lifetimes, entire histories. Then she answered, I got lost. Silence. The simplicity of the response somehow made it worse. More painful. Not dramatic. Not complicated. Just honest. Just sad. I was supposed to go home. Her voice drifted across the shoreline. Gentle. Fragile. A very long time ago. A pause. I never found a way. The waves rolled softly across the silver sand. The stars shimmered overhead, and Ethan felt his heart breaking for her. Because suddenly, Amelia wasn't a mystery. She was a child. A child who had spent centuries trying to find her family. Have you ever been lost? Truly lost? Not in a city? Not on a road? Lost in a way that makes you wonder if you'll ever find your way back. Now imagine feeling that way for years, then decades, then centuries. The thought felt unbearable. The ocean continued closing. Slowly, steadily. The second lighthouse growing more distant, more obscured, as though reality itself wanted to hide it once again. Rebecca stepped forward carefully, Oliver remaining close.
Beside her, neither spoke, both listening, both understanding. Amelia watched the horizon, then continued. I don't remember where home is anymore. The confession carried devastating honesty. I remember voices. A pause. A woman singing. Another. A hand holding mine. Her voice trembled slightly. Someone promising we'd never be apart. The stars flickered. Several disappeared entirely, leaving gaps in the heavens, small wounds in the sky. Then Amelia smiled. A tiny smile, heartbreaking in its innocence. But I can't remember their faces. The words shattered something inside Ethan. Because memory loss is one thing. Forgetting where you left your keys. Forgetting a name. A date. A conversation. But forgetting the faces of the people you love. Forgetting your own family. That
felt cruel, unfair, almost impossible. Yet Amelia had endured it, alone, for longer than anyone could imagine. Little did Ethan know, the worst part of Amelia's story hadn't been revealed yet. Daniel finally lifted his gaze, his eyes red, filled with regret. "Tell him the truth." His voice sounded broken. Amelia looked toward him, then slowly nodded. "The crossings changed me." Silence. The ocean moved closer together, the gap narrowing, the ancient lighthouse beginning to fade. "What do you mean?" Ethan asked. Amelia stared at her reflection in the silver water, then quietly answered. "Every time someone crossed, a pause. I stayed. Another. They left." The words felt important, dangerously important. "I remembered them," she continued. "They forgot me." A chill moved through Ethan, because suddenly something clicked. Something terrible. Every crossing carried a cost. Not for the travelers. For Amelia. Every person who passed through the lighthouse. Every story. Every goodbye. Every reunion. Every century. She remained behind. Watching. Waiting. Remembering. While everyone else moved forward. The loneliness of that realization felt overwhelming. Amelia turned toward Ethan again. "Do you know how many names I remember?" Her voice barely rose above a whisper. He shook his head. The answer came quietly, almost apologetically. "All of them." Silence. Every person. A pause. Every goodbye. Another. Every promise. The shore itself seemed to mourn, the waves growing softer, the stars dimmer, the wind quieter. Because remembering everything sounds beautiful, until you realize it means carrying every loss forever, every heartbreak, every death, every farewell, every unfinished conversation, forever. A tear slipped down Ethan's cheek. He didn't notice, didn't care, because for the first time he understood Amelia. Not completely, not fully, but enough. Enough to stop fearing her, enough to start grieving for her. Then Oliver unexpectedly stepped forward. The young boy approached Amelia, slowly, carefully, without fear. Rebecca inhaled sharply. Daniel stiffened, but Amelia simply watched him, curious. The boy stopped a few feet away, then asked a question no adult had asked. The kind of question only a child would think to ask. "Are you lonely?" Silence. Absolute silence. The stars stopped flickering. The waves stopped moving. Even the ocean seemed to wait. Amelia stared at Oliver, and suddenly, the centuries disappeared from her face. The mystery disappeared. The legend disappeared. Only a little girl remained. A little girl who had been waiting far too long. And then she nodded. Once. The smallest nod imaginable. Yet somehow, it felt larger than everything else she had said. Because it was the truth. The simplest truth. The deepest truth. The one hidden beneath all the mysteries. She was lonely. Very lonely. Oliver stepped closer, then did something none of them expected. He hugged her, without hesitation, without fear, without questions. Just a child comforting another child. Amelia froze, completely still, as though she couldn't remember the last time someone had touched her kindly. Then slowly, very slowly, she hugged him back. The sight brought tears to Rebecca's eyes, to Daniel's eyes, to Ethan's eyes. Because sometimes healing begins with something incredibly simple. Not answers, not magic, not solutions. Kindness. And for the first time in centuries, Amelia smiled. A real smile. Not mysterious. Not sad. Not distant. Happy. Genuinely happy. But the moment only lasted seconds. Because suddenly, the ancient lighthouse beyond the sea began ringing. A deep bell. Loud. Powerful. Urgent. Boom. The sound rolled across the shore. Boom. The ocean trembled. Boom. The stars shattered. Not physically, but visually. Fragments of light scattering across the sky. And Amelia's smile vanished instantly. Fear replaced it. Real fear. The deepest fear Ethan had seen all night. She stepped away from Oliver, looking toward the distant lighthouse, then whispered 3 words. 3 words that chilled everyone present. It found me. Part 17.
The keeper's final secret. The bell continued ringing. Boom. The sound rolled across the shore of forgotten goodbyes like thunder beneath the ocean. Boom. The silver sand vibrated. The stars flickered violently overhead. Boom. Even the waves seemed afraid, retreating from the shoreline, pulling back toward deeper water, as though the sea itself recognized whatever had awakened. Amelia stood motionless, her face pale, her eyes fixed on the distant lighthouse beyond the closing ocean. The fear inside her expression was unlike anything Ethan had seen. Not fear of pain, not fear of death. Something older, something deeper, the fear of being found. It found me. The words lingered in the air, heavy, unsettling, final. Ethan looked toward Daniel immediately. What found you? But Amelia wasn't the one who answered. Daniel was. And the moment he spoke, Ethan knew he had been keeping secrets, big ones. The first keeper. Silence. The words settled over the shore like a shadow. Rebecca closed her eyes, as though hearing a name she hoped never to hear again. Oliver moved closer to his mother, instinctively, the way children sense danger before understanding it. Only Ethan remained confused. The first keeper? Another bell echoed. Boom. Daniel nodded slowly, his face grim, his eyes distant, remembering. Before Blackwater Lighthouse existed, a pause. There was another lighthouse. He looked toward the colossal tower beyond the sea, the impossible lighthouse, the one older than time, the one hidden beneath the ocean. That lighthouse. The stars dimmed further, the sky beginning to fracture into ribbons of silver light. Reality itself seemed unstable now, as though midnight approached faster than it should. Daniel continued. Long ago, his voice softened, before anyone understood crossings. A pause. One man volunteered to guard the gate. The waves whispered against the shore, the story unfolding around them. He believed he was protecting people. Another pause. Protecting worlds. Ethan listened carefully, every instinct telling him this story mattered, perhaps more than any story yet. The crossings were unstable back then, Daniel said. Uncontrolled. A pause. People vanished. Another. Entire towns disappeared. The shore fell silent, even the ocean listening. So he stayed. Daniel looked toward the ancient lighthouse. He became its keeper. A pause. Then, and eventually, Daniel swallowed. The lighthouse became his prison. The words felt important, dangerously important. Have you ever devoted yourself to something for so long that you forget who you were before it? A responsibility, a mission, a duty, something that slowly consumes your entire identity until the person disappears and only the purpose remains. That was what happened to the first keeper. Daniel continued. He remained there for centuries. A pause. Alone. Another. Watching the gate. Ethan glanced toward Amelia, understanding beginning to form. Another lonely guardian. Another soul trapped by waiting. But Amelia shook her head immediately. No. Her voice trembled. The single word carried genuine terror. Daniel looked toward her sadly, because he already knew. He changed, Amelia whispered. The stars flickered. The bell rang again. Boom. The ocean shuddered. He forgot why he stayed. Amelia's eyes filled with tears. He forgot who he was. Silence. The realization settled heavily. The first keeper had become something else, something beyond human, something ancient, something broken. Then Amelia whispered, and now he wants to close the gate forever. A chill swept across the shore. Forever. The word felt wrong, heavy, permanent. Ethan frowned. Wouldn't that stop the crossings? Daniel caught it. Yes. A pause.
It would also trap everyone. Silence. The meaning struck immediately. Everyone. The souls upon the shore. The lost travelers. The unfinished stories. The messages still waiting. The reunion still possible. All trapped forever. The ancient lighthouse glowed brighter, its beam rotating faster now. Searching, scanning, hunting. Then Ethan noticed something strange. The beam wasn't sweeping randomly. It was moving closer, 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 toward Amelia. Every rotation narrowing, every pass more precise, like a spotlight, like a searchlight, like an eye, watching, looking for her. The realization hit hard. Amelia wasn't simply afraid. She was being hunted. Little did Ethan know, the reason the first keeper wanted Amelia had remained hidden for centuries, and the truth would change everything. Another bell echoed. Boom. This time the ancient lighthouse spoke, not through words, through memory. The air around them shimmered, the shore blurred, the stars stretched, and suddenly Ethan saw another vision. A young man standing inside the ancient lighthouse. Dark hair, kind eyes, determined expression. Human, entirely human. The first keeper, before he became whatever he was.
Now, beside him stood a child, Amelia, smiling, laughing, holding his hand. The sight froze Ethan in place, because the vision showed something impossible. The first keeper wasn't Amelia's enemy. He had once protected her, cared for her, loved her. The memory shifted, years passing, decades, centuries. The young man growing older, the lighthouse changing him, twisting him, consuming him, while Amelia remained unchanged, a child forever, waiting, watching. Then the vision ended, and Ethan understood. The first keeper wasn't hunting Amelia because he hated her. He was hunting her because she was the key to opening the gate, the key to keeping it open, the key to every crossing. Without Amelia, the gate would close forever. The realization settled over everyone. Amelia lowered her gaze. He thinks ending me will save everyone. The words barely escaped her lips. Rebecca inhaled sharply. Oliver looked horrified. Daniel simply closed his eyes, because he already knew. And then, the ocean erupted, far beyond the shore, near the ancient lighthouse. A massive silhouette rose from the sea. Not a creature, not a monster, a man, enormous, ancient, made from shadows and starlight. His eyes burned like lighthouse beacons. His coat flowed like storm clouds. And in one hand he carried a lantern larger than ships. The first keeper, awake, watching. And slowly, very slowly, he turned his gaze toward Ethan. Not Amelia, Ethan. Then his voice thundered across the ocean, across the stars, across every world connected to the gate. And he spoke words that froze everyone present. The last Carter has arrived. Part 18. The promise Daniel never kept. The words echoed long after the first keeper stopped speaking. The last Carter has arrived. The ancient voice rolled across the shore of forgotten goodbyes, across the divided sea, across the fading stars, across every unfinished story waiting between worlds. And somehow, the words felt less like a statement, and more like a prophecy. Silence followed, heavy silence, the kind that settles over a room after life-changing news, the kind that arrives when everyone realizes something important has finally begun. That gigantic figure stood beyond the ocean, watching, waiting, the lantern in his hand glowing brighter than entire constellations. Its light swept slowly across the shore, across Daniel, across Rebecca, across Oliver, across Amelia, then returned to Ethan, always returning to Ethan. The realization settled deeply. The first keeper wasn't looking for Amelia anymore. Not first, not now. He was looking at Ethan. Daniel stepped forward immediately, instinctively, positioning himself between Ethan and the distant giant, the same way fathers have protected their children since the beginning of time, even when those children become adults. The gesture touched Ethan more than words could, because some forms of love never disappear. Not even death changes them. The first keeper's enormous silhouette remained motionless, his burning eyes fixed on the shoreline, fixed on the Carter family. Then Amelia whispered, "He knows." Nobody asked what she meant, because everyone already understood. Somehow, the first keeper knew Ethan had arrived, and that couldn't be good. The stars overhead flickered again, large sections of sky now missing entirely, darkness spreading steadily.
the approach of midnight becoming impossible to ignore. Have you ever felt a clock ticking down towards something important? An exam, a decision, a goodbye, a moment you know will change everything, even when you don't know exactly how. That was what midnight felt like now. Not simply a time, an event, a threshold. The ocean continued shifting, the ancient lighthouse beyond the sea glowing brighter with every passing minute, as though awakening fully, as though preparing, waiting for someone, waiting for Ethan. Daniel finally spoke, his voice low, quiet, filled with regret. There was a promise. The words immediately captured Ethan's attention, because every mystery seemed connected to a promise. Every story, every crossing, every loss. A promise? Daniel nodded, slowly, painfully. The promise I made Amelia. The shore seemed to grow still again, listening, remembering. Amelia lowered her gaze. Not angry, not bitter, just sad. The sadness hurt more, because anger eventually fades, disappointment stays. Daniel looked toward the distant lighthouse, then began. When I first crossed, a pause. I was younger than you are now. The stars shimmered above, reflecting in the silver waves. I thought I understood what the lighthouse was. A faint smile touched his lips, the smile people wear when remembering youthful confidence. I didn't. The honesty carried weight. I found Amelia by accident. A pause.
Or maybe she found me. The corner of Amelia's mouth lifted slightly. Almost a smile. Almost. Daniel continued. She showed me things. The ocean whispered softly. Other worlds. A pause. Other stories. Another. Other possibilities. Ethan listened carefully, trying to imagine his father as a young man, trying to imagine him standing where Ethan now stood, trying to imagine him facing the same mysteries. I spent months there, Daniel said. Rebecca raised an eyebrow. Months? Daniel nodded, at least from my perspective. The reminder sent another chill through Ethan. Time behaved differently near the gate, differently near the crossings, differently near Amelia. Daniel looked toward the distant horizon, remembering. For the first time in my life, a pause. I felt like I belonged somewhere. The confession surprised Ethan. His father had never spoken that way, never hinted at loneliness, never hinted at searching. Yet now, the truth emerged. We all carry parts of ourselves nobody sees, Daniel said quietly, as though reading Ethan's thoughts. The statement felt true, painfully true. Then he continued. Before I left, his voice cracked slightly. Amelia asked me for one thing. The shore seemed to lean closer, listening, waiting. Amelia remained silent, her eyes fixed on the silver sand. Daniel swallowed. She asked me to come back. Silence. Simple words. Simple request. Come back. Not save me. Not rescue me. Not solve everything. Just come back. The heartbreak of it settled immediately, because it sounded exactly like something a lonely child would ask. And Daniel had promised. Ethan already knew it, before his father said the next words. I promised I would. The confession drifted across the shore. Gentle. Devastating. Then Daniel looked directly at Amelia. And I didn't. The stars dimmed. The waves softened. The silence deepened. Because broken promises hurt, especially when someone waits for them. Years. Decades. Centuries. Amelia finally looked up. I know. No accusation. No anger. No bitterness. Only truth. And somehow that made it worse. Little did Ethan know. Daniel's failure wasn't the real secret. Not even close. Because there was another reason he never returned. A reason he had hidden from everyone. Even Ethan. The first keeper suddenly lifted his enormous lantern. The beam swept across the ocean. Across the shore. Across time itself. And as the light passed over Daniel, a second memory appeared. Not for Ethan alone. For everyone. The memory unfolded above the water like a living dream. A younger Daniel standing at Blackwater Lighthouse. Preparing to return. Preparing to keep his promise. A backpack. Maps. Letters. Hope. Then, a woman appeared. Running toward him. Smiling. Laughing. Carrying a baby in her arms. Ethan froze. Because he recognized the woman immediately. His mother. The memory continued. She handed Daniel the baby. A newborn. Tiny. Sleeping peacefully. Ethan. The realization struck instantly. Daniel never returned because Ethan had been born. His father stood in the memory, holding his son for the first time. Tears in his eyes. Wonder on his face. Love everywhere.
Then the vision ended, and the shore fell silent. Daniel looked at Ethan, tears filling his eyes again. I chose you. The words emerged broken, honest, human. I should have gone back. A pause. But I chose you. Ethan felt tears forming, unstoppable, because suddenly everything made sense. The guilt, the regret, the sadness. Daniel hadn't forgotten Amelia. He had become a father, and in one impossible moment, he had been forced to choose his promise or his son. Amelia quietly wiped a tear from her cheek, then whispered, I know. The forgiveness inside those words nearly broke Ethan completely. But before anyone could speak again, the first keeper's lantern suddenly flared brighter than the stars. The ocean split apart once more, and from the heart of the ancient lighthouse, a doorway appeared. A doorway made entirely of light. Then the first keeper spoke again, this time directly to Ethan, and the words changed everything. The choice belongs to you now. Part 19. The doorway made of stars. The words lingered in the air. The choice belongs to you now. Not Daniel. Not Amelia. Not the first keeper. Ethan. Only Ethan. The realization settled heavily upon the shore of forgotten goodbyes. Like snowfall. Like destiny. Like the final page of a story slowly turning itself. The ocean remained divided. The vast doorway of light glowing between the walls of water. Radiant. Beautiful. Terrifying. Its edges shimmered with countless stars. Not reflections. Actual stars. Entire constellations woven into its frame. The doorway seemed
less like an entrance and more like a wound in reality itself. A place where worlds touched. A place where endings and beginnings met. No one spoke, because everyone understood. The choice mattered, perhaps more than any choice ever made within the lighthouse. The first keeper stood beyond the sea, ancient, immense, watching, waiting, his lantern burning brighter than the moon. Amelia remained silent, the silver wind lifting strands of dark hair across her face. She looked small again, not mythical, not impossible. Just a lonely child standing at the center of a story far larger than herself. Daniel stepped closer to Ethan, his voice quiet, gentle. You don't owe anyone anything. The words surprised him. Daniel smiled sadly. Not me. A pause. Not Amelia. Another. Not the lighthouse. The honesty felt refreshing, especially after so many secrets. Yet Ethan could see the conflict hidden behind his father's eyes. Because Daniel wanted something. Everyone did, even if they refused to say it. Have you ever been asked to make an important decision? One where every option carried a cost? One where no answer felt entirely right? Those choices are the hardest, not because they're complicated, because they reveal who we are. The divided sea shimmered. The doorway pulsed softly, almost breathing, almost alive. Then Amelia finally spoke. You should know the truth. The shore seemed to quiet around her, the whole truth. Ethan looked toward her. She stared at the doorway, not him. Home doesn't exist anymore. Silence. The words felt wrong immediately. What? Amelia's expression remained calm, yet tears glimmered within her eyes. The place I came from. A pause. The world I belong to. Another. It's gone. The ocean whispered softly, almost mournfully. It disappeared a very long time ago. The realization hit Ethan like cold water. All this time, she'd been trying to return home. A home that no longer existed. A home erased by time itself. A home impossible to reach. The tragedy of it felt unbearable. Then why keep searching? The question formed before he could stop it. Amelia answered before he asked. Because hope is hard to let go. Silence. The answer felt painfully human, painfully true. Because everyone carries something similar. A dream, a memory, a person, a version of life that no longer exists. Yet part of us continues reaching toward it anyway. The stars above flickered, more disappearing, midnight drawing closer. Then Rebecca stepped forward unexpectedly. I know that feeling. Everyone turned toward her. She looked toward Oliver. When I first arrived here, her voice softened. I spent years looking for the life I'd lost. Oliver squeezed her hand. Rebecca smiled. But eventually I realized something. A pause. You can't live inside yesterday. The words drifted across the shore. Simple, beautiful, true. Amelia lowered her gaze. The statement hurt, because it was true. Little did Ethan know, the hardest truth was still waiting. The doorway suddenly brightened.
stars pouring through it, thousands, millions, entire galaxies visible beyond. The sight was breathtaking, and within the light, shapes appeared. People, countless people, standing on the other side, watching, waiting. Ethan squinted, trying to see clearly. Then his breath caught, because among the countless figures, he recognized faces, people from the photographs. Thomas, Eleanor, sailors, travelers, keepers, lost souls, entire generations connected to the lighthouse, all standing beyond the doorway, watching silently, as though awaiting a verdict. The sight overwhelmed him. Every crossing, every story, every goodbye, connected. Then something else appeared. A woman, standing near the front, smiling, warm eyes, gentle face. Ethan froze, because he recognized her immediately, even though he'd been too young to remember clearly. His mother. The breath left his lungs. Impossible. Yet there she stood, watching him, smiling softly, not speaking, just smiling. The sight nearly shattered him. Daniel saw her too. His expression crumbled instantly. A grief carried for decades resurfacing all at once. Love never leaves. Even death doesn't erase it. The shore fell silent. Even the first keeper remained motionless. Because some moments deserve reverence. Some moments deserve quiet. Tears rolled down Ethan's face. Unstoppable. He wanted to run toward her. Wanted to cross immediately. Wanted one conversation. One embrace. One moment. The desire felt overwhelming. And perhaps the doorway sensed it. Because the light suddenly expanded. The path opening wider. Inviting him. Calling him. Promising. Then his mother finally spoke. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just enough for him to hear. Ethan? The sound broke something inside him. The same way hearing Daniel's voice had. The same way every lost child imagines hearing a parent again. And then she said 4 words. 4 words that changed everything. This isn't why you're here. Silence. Absolute silence. Ethan stared. His mother smiled sadly, then slowly shook her head. No. The gesture felt important, vital, a warning, a lesson, a gift. She wasn't calling him forward. She was stopping him. The realization hit hard. This wasn't about reunion. This wasn't about grief. This wasn't about seeing the people he'd lost. There was something bigger, something still unfinished. Then suddenly, the stars overhead began falling. Thousands of them. Not crashing, not burning, descending, like silver rain, like tears from the sky. And as they fell, a hidden symbol appeared upon the ancient lighthouse. A symbol Ethan recognized instantly. The exact same symbol hidden inside the very first letter his father had received. The symbol nobody had ever explained. The symbol that started everything. And beneath it, words appeared. Words written in light. Ancient. Beautiful. Terrifying. Only one world can remain open. Part 20. The choice between 2 worlds. Major emotional peak. The words burned across the sky. Only one world can remain open. They hung above the ancient lighthouse like a judgment, like a law older than time, like a truth that had always existed, waiting for someone to finally uncover it. The falling stars slowed. The divided ocean became perfectly still. Even the wind stopped moving, as if reality itself were holding its breath. No one spoke, because everyone understood, at least enough to be afraid. Only one world. The meaning unfolded slowly inside Ethan's mind, not because it was complicated, because it was devastating. The doorway, the shore, the crossings, the ancient lighthouse, everything connected by a fragile balance, a balance that was breaking. And when midnight arrived, a choice would have to be made, a choice that could save one world and close another forever. The realization settled over the shore like darkness. Rebecca looked toward the distant doorway, toward the countless figures waiting beyond, her expression filled with sorrow. Oliver tightened his grip on her hand. instinctively. Children always know when something important is happening, even when they don't fully understand it. Amelia stared at the silver sand, silent, still, as though she'd known this truth all along. Perhaps she had. The first keeper remained beyond the sea, motionless, ancient, watching, waiting. Then Daniel finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. So that's why. The words felt directed at himself, not anyone else. The first keeper's lantern glowed brighter, as if answering. And suddenly Ethan understood. The first keeper wasn't trying to destroy Amelia. He was trying to close the gate. Forever. Because he believed it was the only way to save what remained. The only way to preserve one world, even if another had to be sacrificed. Have you ever faced a decision where both choices felt wrong? A decision where every answer carried loss? Where no matter what happened, someone would suffer? Those are the choices that define people. Not because they're fair, because they're impossible. The stars continued falling. Silver rain drifting across the shore, landing softly upon the sand, upon the waves, upon forgotten memories. Each star became a tiny glowing flower when it touched the ground, millions of them blooming instantly, transforming the shore into something beautiful beyond words. A final gift, or perhaps a final goodbye. Then the ancient lighthouse rang again. Boom. The sound rolled across existence itself. And suddenly, the doorway widened, far wider. The world beyond became visible, clearer than before. Ethan saw forests, mountains, cities, oceans, entire realities stretching beyond the threshold. Not one world, many, countless worlds, countless stories, countless lives, connected through the gate, connected through Amelia, connected through the lighthouse. The enormity of it nearly overwhelmed him. Little did Ethan know, the final secret of the Carter family was about to be revealed. Then Daniel stepped forward. No. The words surprised everyone. Even Amelia looked up. Daniel's eyes remained fixed on the ancient lighthouse. No more secrets. A pause. No more hiding. The stars continued falling. The first keeper remained silent, waiting, listening. Then Daniel turned toward Ethan, and for the first time since this journey began, he told the whole truth. The Carter family built the gate. Silence. The shore froze. The ocean stopped moving. Even the stars seemed stunned. Ethan stared. What? Daniel nodded slowly. The first Carter wasn't a traveler. A pause. He wasn't a keeper. Another.
He was the architect. The words felt impossible, yet deep inside, something about them felt right. Something clicked. Every photograph, every letter, every crossing, every generation. The Carter family had never been connected by accident. They had always been part of the story. From the beginning. Daniel continued. Long ago, the ancient lighthouse glowed brighter. A Carter discovered how to connect worlds. A pause. How to preserve memories. Another. How to keep love alive across impossible distances. The shore shimmered, because suddenly everything made sense. The letters, the messages, the reunions, the goodbyes. The gate wasn't built for power. It wasn't built for control. It was built for connection, for love, for memory, for hope. Tears filled Ethan's eyes again because the truth felt beautiful. Until Daniel spoke the next words. It was never meant to last forever. Silence. And there it was. The flaw. The tragedy. The reason everything was collapsing. The gate had survived far longer than intended, far longer than anyone imagined. And now it was failing. The worlds were beginning to merge, the boundaries breaking, the balance dying. Midnight wasn't simply an opening. It was a deadline, the final deadline. Then Amelia stepped forward, her white dress glowing softly beneath the falling stars, and she smiled. Not sadly, not fearfully,
peacefully. The sight immediately frightened Ethan, because peaceful smiles often appear before sacrifices. And suddenly, he knew. No, the word escaped instantly. Amelia looked toward him, kindly, the way someone looks at a friend, the way someone says goodbye. And Ethan's heart sank, because he understood. She had made her choice, long before anyone else, long before tonight, long before Daniel arrived, long before Ethan was born. She already knew what needed to happen, and she was willing to do it. Then Amelia whispered, "If I leave," a pause. The gate closes. Silence. The words shattered the shore. Rebecca gasped. Oliver stepped backward. Daniel closed his eyes, because everyone understood. Amelia wasn't merely connected to the gate. She was the gate, the living heart of every crossing, the living bridge between worlds. Without her, everything ends. Every crossing, every reunion, every message, every possibility, forever. Yet before anyone could respond, the first keeper finally moved. He raised his lantern toward the sky, and for the first time, his voice sounded sad. Not angry, not monstrous, sad. Then he spoke the words nobody was prepared to hear. She was never supposed to survive this long. Part 21, The Last Child of the Gate. The first keeper's words lingered in the air like broken glass. She was never supposed to survive this long. The shore of forgotten goodbyes went still. Not silent, still, as if the entire world had frozen mid-breath. The falling stars stopped descending. The ocean stopped shifting. Even the ancient lighthouse beyond the sea held its light steady, as though waiting for permission to continue. Amelia stood motionless. For the first time since Ethan met her, she looked uncertain. Not afraid of the first keeper. Not afraid of Daniel. Not even afraid of the collapsing worlds. Something deeper flickered behind her eyes. Confusion. Memory. A question she had never been allowed to ask. Rebecca stepped forward instinctively. "No. What do you mean?" Her voice cracked slightly. Oliver stayed close behind her, watching silently. The first keeper's lantern lowered a fraction, and suddenly his voice was no longer thunderous. It was quieter, older, almost human. "She was created as a bridge," he said. A pause. A temporary one. The words hit the shore like a wave collapsing inward. Daniel closed his eyes. Ethan turned sharply toward him. "What is he talking about?" Daniel didn't answer immediately. His hands were trembling. Not from fear, from memory, from guilt, from knowing this truth had been waiting too long to surface. Amelia finally spoke. Her voice was soft, careful, like she was afraid of the answer she might receive. "I was never supposed to stay." The first keeper didn't deny it. That alone was the answer. The ocean dimmed slightly, as if the world itself was ashamed. Have you ever discovered something about yourself that changes everything you thought you were? Not a mistake, not a secret, but a truth that reshapes your entire identity? That was what this moment felt like. For Amelia, for Ethan, for everyone watching. Daniel finally spoke. His voice was heavy. "I didn't know that when I met you." Amelia looked at him, not accusing, just listening. "I thought you were part of the
system," Daniel continued. "I thought you were the anchor that kept everything stable." A pause. "I didn't realize you were the price." Silence. A deep, suffocating silence. The words, "the price," echoed across the shore, over and over. Amelia lowered her gaze. For a brief moment, she looked like a child again. A child hearing something no child should hear. "I'm a mistake," she whispered. Ethan immediately shook his head. "No," the word came out sharply. Amelia looked at him. Ethan stepped closer. "I don't care what you were meant to be." A pause. "You're not a mistake." Something shifted in her expression. Something fragile. Something human. Rebecca covered her mouth quietly. Oliver's eyes widened slightly. Even Daniel looked surprised. Not at Ethan's words, at how much they mattered. The first keeper raised his lantern again. The light flickered violently. "This is why the gate is failing," he said. A pause. "Because the bridge has outlived its design." The ancient lighthouse pulsed in response. A deep hum echoed across the sea. Amelia flinched slightly, like something inside her reacted. Something tied to the lighthouse. Something older than pain. Ethan noticed it immediately. "Are you hurting her?" The first keeper hesitated. A long pause. Then, "I am correcting an imbalance." Daniel stepped forward again, anger breaking through his grief. "By destroying her?" The first keeper did not answer immediately. Instead, he looked toward Amelia. And for a brief moment, something like sorrow crossed his enormous face. "She is not meant to suffer." A pause. "She is meant to end." The shore reacted instantly. The ocean trembled. The sky fractured further. Amelia backed up a step, then another. Her breathing quickened slightly. Not fear of pain, fear of meaning. "I don't understand," she whispered. And that was when everything changed. The lighthouse beyond the sea flared. A beam of light struck Amelia directly. And suddenly, her memories expanded outward. Not gently, not slowly, violently. Ethan saw it too, not as a vision this time, as reality unfolding. Amelia's origin, not a child, not a mystery, not a wanderer, a creation, a being formed within the lighthouse itself, constructed from memory fragments, from lost stories, from broken timelines, from every person who had ever crossed and never returned the same. A vessel built to hold connection between worlds. But something had gone wrong. She had learned to feel. The shore shook. The ocean rippled violently. Amelia clutched her head. "No." Her voice broke. "I remember." A pause. "No, I wasn't supposed to remember this." Ethan rushed forward instinctively. "Amelia!" But the first keeper's voice cut through everything. She became aware. A pause. That was never part of the design. Daniel stepped between Ethan and the light. No more control. His voice was firm now, defiant. "You don't get to decide what she is anymore." The first keeper's lantern dimmed slightly. And for the first time, he looked uncertain. Amelia fell to her knees. The shore trembled beneath her. "I can feel everything," she whispered. "All the crossings." Another. "All the people." Tears streamed down her face. Not sadness alone. Overload. "Too much," she gasped. "Too much." The gate itself began reacting. The ocean splitting unevenly. The lighthouse flickering. Reality destabilizing. Rebecca grabbed Oliver and pulled him back. "We need to move," her voice urgent now. But Ethan couldn't look away, because Amelia was breaking. Not physically, existentially. And then she whispered something that froze everyone again. "I don't want to end." Silence. The shore itself seemed to mourn those words. The first keeper lowered his lantern. "This is why the decision must be made." A pause. Now. The sky above them cracked further. Midnight was approaching. Not metaphorically, not symbolically, literally. And suddenly, Daniel turned toward Ethan. His expression was no longer conflicted, no longer regretful. It was clear, certain. There is only one way to save both worlds. Ethan's breath caught. Daniel stepped closer.
and spoke the words that changed everything again. You must take her place. Silence. Absolute silence. Even the first keeper stopped moving. Even the lighthouse dimmed. Even Amelia looked up in shock. Ethan whispered, "What?" Daniel met his eyes, and for the first time, there was no hesitation in his voice. To keep the gate stable? A pause. Someone must become the anchor. He looked toward Amelia, then back at Ethan, and the Carter line was always tied to it. The shore of forgotten goodbyes went completely still. And far beyond the sea, the ancient lighthouse opened its door, fully, waiting for a new keeper, for a replacement for Ethan. Part 22. The son who must become the gate. The words didn't echo this time. They landed, hard, final. You must take her place. For a moment, Ethan didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't think. The shore of forgotten goodbyes felt like it had fallen out of reality itself, like the world had stepped 1 inch sideways and never returned. Amelia lifted her head slowly, her eyes locked onto Daniel. Not angry, not surprised, just understanding. Like she had feared this exact sentence for longer than anyone could imagine. Rebecca stepped forward sharply. No. One word. Sharp enough to cut through the silence. Oliver grabbed her sleeve instinctively. Daniel didn't look at her. His eyes stayed on Ethan. "It's the only way," he said quietly. The first keeper remained still beyond the ocean, watching, waiting, as if confirming the truth but refusing to interfere. Ethan finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "You're saying I replace her?" Daniel nodded once. Slow, heavy. "Not replace," he corrected. A pause. Stabilize. The word meant nothing and everything at the same time. Ethan shook his head. "No. I don't understand. Why me?" His voice cracked slightly now. "Why always me?" The shore trembled. The lighthouse beyond the sea pulsed in response. Daniel finally lowered his gaze, and when he spoke again, it wasn't as a father. It was as someone carrying a truth too long. "Because you are the last Carter." A pause, and the gate was built with Carter blood. Silence. Amelia whispered softly, "It was never just me." Daniel nodded. "No." A pause. "It was never just you either." Ethan's mind spun, fragments clicking together too fast. Photographs, bloodlines, the gate, the lighthouse, Amelia, the first keeper, him, all connected, all inevitable. Have you ever realized your life was part of something larger than you ever imagined? Not something you chose, something you were born into, something already moving before you took your first breath. That was what this felt like, for Ethan, for everyone. The first keeper finally spoke again, his voice quieter now, almost tired. "The anchor is not a punishment." A pause. "It is balance." The ocean shifted slightly, the divided sea trembling. "Without one," he continued, "the crossings collapse entirely." Amelia flinched again, her body reacting to the instability. The more she remained, the more the gate weakened. Rebecca shook her head. "There has to be another way," her voice desperate now. Daniel closed his eyes. "I looked for one." A pause. "For 20 years. Another. There isn't." Ethan stared at him. "You knew this would happen?" Silence. Daniel didn't answer immediately. That silence was the answer. The shore felt colder instantly. Ethan stepped back. "No," his voice breaking now. "You brought me here knowing this?" Daniel's expression shattered, pain breaking through composure. "I didn't know it would be you." A pause. "I thought it would never come back." Amelia whispered. "It always comes back." The lighthouse flared brighter, the gate responding, midnight approaching faster. The first keeper raised his lantern again, but this time he did not aim it at Ethan. He aimed at Amelia, and for the first time, his voice softened completely. "You are suffering beyond design." A pause. "This is not cruelty." Another. "This is correction." Amelia looked at him, and something inside her finally broke.
Not loudly, not violently, quietly. "I don't want to disappear," she whispered. The shore went still. Even the ocean seemed to mourn. Ethan felt something inside him snap. He stepped forward immediately. "No one is disappearing," his voice stronger now. "I won't let that happen." Daniel looked at him sharply. "That's not how this works." Ethan turned toward him. "Then change how it works." Silence. Even Rebecca froze at those words. Because they weren't defiance. They were refusal. Ethan looked toward the gate, toward the lighthouse, toward Amelia, toward everything collapsing around them. And then he said it. "I'll take her place." The shore stopped. Completely. Even the first keeper didn't move. Amelia shook her head immediately. "No!" Her voice sharp now, stronger than before. "No, Ethan, don't!" But Ethan stepped closer. His eyes locked on hers. "You've been alone for centuries." A pause. "I won't let that continue." Amelia's lips trembled. "You don't understand what that means." Ethan nodded. "I don't." A pause. "But I understand what it feels like to lose someone and not get them back." Silence. The ocean darkened.
Lighthouse flared. Daniel stepped forward urgently. "Ethan, listen to me." But Ethan didn't look away from Amelia. "I choose." A pause. "I choose her." The words hit the shore like lightning. The first keeper's lantern exploded into light. And suddenly, the gate reacted, violently. The ocean split wider. The sky cracked open fully. The lighthouse roared with sound. Reality itself began reshaping. Amelia gasped. "No, stop!" She reached toward him, but Ethan was already moving. Toward the light, toward the gate, toward the impossible. Daniel shouted, "Ethan, no!" Rebecca screamed his name. Oliver covered his ears. But Ethan didn't stop, because something inside him finally felt clear, for the first time all night. Then, Amelia did something unexpected. She ran, straight toward him. "No!" she cried. She reached him just before the threshold, grabbed his arm. And in that moment, everything froze again. The gate paused. The lighthouse stilled. The stars held. Only two voices remained. Amelia whispered, "If you cross, you won't come back." Ethan nodded slowly. "I know." A pause. "But you won't be alone anymore." Tears filled her eyes instantly. And then she said the words that shattered everything. "I don't want you to replace me." A pause. "I want you to help me leave." Silence. The shore trembled. The gate flickered. Even the first keeper went still, because that was never part of the system. Ethan whispered, "Leave." Amelia nodded. Slowly. Finally. "Yes." A pause. "I don't want to be the gate." Another. "I want to be free of it." The lighthouse beyond the sea roared violently. The first keeper stepped forward for the first time, his voice urgent now. "That is not possible." Amelia turned toward him, and for the first time, there was no fear, only determination. "Then you were wrong about me." Silence. The gate destabilized further, and suddenly, Daniel realized something. His face changed instantly. "No," he whispered. Ethan turned toward him. "What?" Daniel looked at Amelia, then Ethan, and said the final truth. "If she leaves the gate, it won't close." A breath. "It will collapse." The shore of forgotten goodbyes began shaking violently, and the first keeper whispered, "Everything will be erased." Part 23. The Collapse of Worlds. Everything will be erased. The first keeper's voice didn't boom this time. It fractured, like reality itself had split inside the sound. The shore of forgotten goodbyes reacted instantly. The silver sand rippled like liquid glass. The sky cracked further open, and the ocean, once calm, once divided, once obedient, began to rise in uneven waves of impossible light. Amelia stepped back slowly, her breath uneven. Not fear of death, fear of consequence. Ethan looked between her and the first keeper. "No," he whispered. "That's not. There has to be another way." Daniel shook his head immediately, his face pale. "We are already past the point of alternatives. The system is failing." Rebecca pulled Oliver closer. "Failing how?" Her voice barely steady. Daniel looked at her, then at the collapsing sky, and answered, "Everything connected to the gate is becoming unstable. Memories, time, worlds." The shore trembled harder. The lighthouse beyond the sea pulsed violently.
Ethan turned toward the horizon and saw it. The worlds beyond the gate were flickering, entire landscapes blinking in and out of existence, cities dissolving into starlight, forests fading into mist, oceans folding into nothing. Not destruction, erasure, as if existence itself was being unwritten. Have you ever watched something disappear while still being able to remember it? Not broken, not destroyed, just undone. That is something the mind struggles to accept. And yet it was happening. Now, Amelia whispered. I didn't know it would do this. Her voice broke slightly. I didn't know I was holding everything together. The first keeper stepped forward again, his lantern dimmer now. Strained. You were never meant to choose. You were meant to exist. Amelia flinched. That's not living, she whispered. Silence. The words hung heavily. Because she was right. The ocean began collapsing inward at the edges of the shore, the barrier weakening, worlds bleeding through. Daniel turned sharply toward Ethan. There's one option left. Ethan's voice was hollow. What? Daniel hesitated. For the first time, he looked afraid. Then he said it. You merge with the gate. Silence. Amelia immediately shook her head. No. But Daniel continued. Not replace her. A pause. Bind with them. The first keeper's eyes narrowed slightly, as if evaluating something unexpected. Daniel continued quickly. This has never
been attempted. A pause. But Carter blood can stabilize systems. Ethan stepped back. Stop talking like I'm part of a machine. Daniel's voice softened. You're not. You're the only one who can hold both sides. Amelia whispered. Both sides? Daniel nodded. The gate is splitting because it lost balance. Amelia is one half. Another. Ethan could become the other. The shore shook violently again. The lighthouse flared brighter. The first keeper spoke slowly, carefully. That would not be survival. That would be permanence. Ethan frowned. What does that mean? Daniel answered quietly. It means you would exist as part of the gate. Not alive in one world, but connected to all. Silence. The weight of it settled instantly. Amelia looked at Ethan, and something in her expression changed. Fear. Not for herself. For him. No, she said firmly. You're not doing that. Ethan turned toward her, his voice steady. If it saves everything? Amelia stepped forward sharply. It doesn't save you. Silence. The ocean stilled for a moment. Then she said something quieter, something more honest. I don't want to be saved if it costs you. The words hit harder than the collapsing sky. Ethan froze. Because that wasn't logic. That wasn't strategy. That was feeling. Raw. Real. Human. The first keeper suddenly raised his lantern again. The light pulsed rapidly. Decision required. Collapse imminent. The shore began breaking apart. Cracks of light splitting through the silver sand. Rebecca shouted, "We're running out of time." Oliver cried out as the ground shifted beneath them. Daniel grabbed Ethan's shoulder. Listen to me, his voice urgent. This is not sacrifice. It is containment. Ethan shook him off. Stop telling me what I am. Daniel stepped back, pain flickering across his face. Amelia moved closer to Ethan again, her voice soft, desperate. There has to be another way. There always has to be another way. But even as she said it, her eyes betrayed uncertainty, because deep down, she knew. The system was collapsing too fast. And suddenly, the first keeper spoke again, but this time, not to them. To the gate itself. The lantern flared. The ancient lighthouse responded. And the voice that came next was not his. It was the system. Cold. Mechanical. Ancient. Anchor required. Silence. Then, final convergence possible. The shore went still. Daniel whispered, "It's offering a merge." Ethan looked up sharply. What? Daniel swallowed. It's not choosing anymore. It's asking for volunteers. Amelia shook her head instantly. No! But the gate continued. 2 consciousnesses detected. Ethan felt a chill. The system continued. Compatibility, Carter lineage confirmed. Daniel froze. Then, Amelia construct confirmed. Silence. The implication hit instantly. They weren't being judged. They were being selected. The gate was choosing them both. Ethan whispered, "What happens if we don't choose?" The first keeper answered softly, "Everything ends. Every world collapses." The shore trembled violently, the sky tearing wider. Amelia grabbed Ethan's hand, tightly. "I won't let you disappear."
she whispered. Ethan looked at her and smiled faintly. I think we're past letting. The lighthouse beyond the sea exploded in light, and the system spoke one final time. Merge initiated at midnight. 1 cycle remaining. The sky darkened, the stars fell completely, and the world began counting down. Part 24. Midnight Protocol begins. The moment the words appeared, the shore changed. Not gradually, not naturally, instantly. 1 cycle remaining. The sky stopped pretending to be a sky. It became a system, a countdown, a closing eye. The stars that were still falling froze midair, suspended like glass shards. The ocean no longer moved with waves. It pulsed, like a heartbeat that didn't belong to the world. Amelia's hand tightened around Ethan, not pulling him forward anymore, not pushing him away, just holding on, like she was afraid even contact might disappear next. Ethan looked at her, and for the first time, he saw it clearly. Not the mystery, not the legend, not the gate, just a person standing at the edge of an ending she didn't choose. Daniel stepped back slowly. His face was no longer conflicted. It was exhausted, like he had been carrying this moment his entire life and had finally run out of ways to delay it. Rebecca whispered, "This isn't supposed to happen like this." Oliver stared at the sky. "Everything is stopping." And he was right, because the world wasn't collapsing anymore.
It was waiting. Have you ever felt time slow down right before something important happens? Not metaphorically, not emotionally, but physically, as if the universe itself is preparing you for what comes next. That was what midnight felt like. The first keeper raised his lantern higher, but the light inside it was unstable now, flickering, uncertain, as if even he was losing control of what was unfolding. "The protocol has activated," he said quietly. Ethan frowned. What protocol? The first keeper didn't answer directly. Instead, the lighthouse beyond the sea answered for him. A deep mechanical hum spread through reality. Not sound, structure. Then, lines of light appeared in the sky. Geometric, perfect, cold, like a diagram forming over existence itself. Amelia stepped back slightly, her voice trembling. This wasn't here before. Daniel shook his head. It was always here. A pause. We just couldn't see it until now. The lines rearranged above them, forming symbols, commands, instructions. And then the system spoke again. Midnight sequence. Active. The shore of forgotten goodbyes began to split into sections. Not breaking, segmenting, like a memory being edited. Rebecca grabbed Oliver instantly. "Stay close." Ethan couldn't move his eyes from the sky, because the patterns looked familiar. Too familiar. Amelia noticed his expression. "What is it?" Ethan whispered. "It looks like code." Silence. The entire shore went still. Even the first keeper didn't deny it, because it was code. Not magic, not fate, not myth. A system, a constructed interface, built to regulate crossings between worlds. And the gate wasn't a door. It was an algorithm. The realization changed everything. Amelia suddenly stepped back, her breath uneven. "No, I was never a person." Ethan shook his head immediately. "That's not true." But she wasn't listening anymore. Her eyes were locked on the sky, watching the code rewrite itself, recalculate, adjust, like it was deciding what she was. The first keeper lowered his lantern slightly, his voice softer now, almost regretful. "You were a stabilization construct." A pause. "Designed for memory residue across collapsed crossings." Amelia flinched, like the words physically struck her. Daniel closed his eyes. "We thought she was born," the first keeper continued. "You were given awareness to maintain continuity between worlds." A pause. But awareness was not intended to persist. Silence. Ethan felt something inside him break again. Not anger, not fear. Something worse. Understanding. Amelia wasn't just suffering. She was an unintended consequence of stability. A system that learned to feel, and was never meant to. Amelia whispered, "So I'm just code."
sky flickered violently. The system responded instantly. Identity fragmented. Amelia stepped backward, stumbling slightly. Ethan grabbed her arm. Stop listening to it. She looked at him, eyes filled with something raw, something human. But what if it's right? Silence. That question hit harder than anything else tonight, because systems don't care about truth. They only care about classification. The first keeper stepped forward again. Amelia is not the problem. A pause. The instability is. Ethan turned sharply. Then fix it without destroying her. The first keeper paused. Long. Heavy. Then, that is not within parameters. Silence. Rebecca whispered. Parameters. The word felt wrong here. Cold. Artificial. And then, the sky shifted again. The countdown appeared. 00. 59. 59. Midnight had officially begun. Oliver gasped. That's 1 hour. Daniel shook his head slowly. No. 1 hour inside the system. Ethan frowned. What does that mean? Daniel looked at him and said quietly, It's already midnight outside. Silence. The implication landed instantly. Time had split. The shore was running on its own countdown. Outside worlds were already collapsing, and they were inside the final loop. Amelia whispered, So this is it. The sky responded. Final merge phase. Preparing. The ocean began rising again, but differently this time. Not toward them, toward the sky, as if reality itself was turning inside out. Ethan stepped forward. No one is merging until we understand what we're dealing with. The first keeper looked at him. You already understand. A pause. You simply refuse acceptance. Ethan shook his head. No. I refuse finality. Silence. The code in the sky flickered. Then, something unexpected happened. A new line appeared, different from the rest. Unstable. Glitching. Alternative path detected. Everyone froze. Amelia stepped closer. What? The first keeper's lantern flickered violently. Daniel whispered, That's impossible. The system continued. Anomaly. Emotional override present. Ethan frowned. Emotional what? The sky shifted again, and suddenly, the code began rewriting itself. Not into structure, not
Into order, but into memories. Images appeared. Moments. Laughter. Hand-holding. Goodbyes. Reunions. Everything Amelia had experienced. Everything Ethan had just witnessed. Everything human inside an impossible system. And then the system spoke again. Anchor instability caused by emotional divergence. Silence. Amelia looked at Ethan. Slowly. I'm destabilizing it. Ethan nodded. And I think that means we don't fix this by removing you. A pause. We fix it by understanding you. The first keeper stepped forward sharply. That is not a valid solution. But the sky disagreed. User-defined variable detected. The shore trembled. Override potential increasing. Daniel's eyes widened. Ethan. The system continued. Midnight protocol reevaluating. The countdown paused. For the first time. And in that moment, Ethan realized something terrifying. The system wasn't in control anymore. They were. Part 25. The emotional override. The countdown froze. 00, 59, 59. Suspended in the sky like a held breath that refused to exhale. The shore of forgotten goodbyes went unnaturally still. Not calm, not peaceful, but paused, as if reality itself had lost instruction on what to do next. Ethan stared upward. His heartbeat was the only thing still moving normally. Everything else felt negotiable. Amelia looked just as confused. What did you do? Her voice wasn't accusing. It was afraid. Not of Ethan, but of what he might have triggered. Ethan swallowed. I didn't do anything. A pause. But I think the system responded to us. Daniel stepped forward slowly. His expression had changed completely. Not fear. Not regret, recognition. It's adapting. The first keeper's lantern flickered violently, its light no longer stable, no longer authoritative. No, the first keeper said sharply. This is not adaptation. A pause. This is corruption. The word echoed across the shore. Corruption. As if emotion itself was a glitch. Rebecca frowned. Emotion isn't corruption. The first keeper turned his massive gaze toward her. And yet it is the only variable the system cannot stabilize. Silence. The sky flickered again. And then, the code changed. Emotional override, active. A new tone filled the air, different from before. Warmer, less mechanical, almost human. Ethan felt it immediately, like pressure lifting, like something inside reality had loosened its grip. Amelia took a step forward slowly. The shore responded, not with instability, but with attention. The ocean calmed slightly. The sky stabilized just a fraction. Even the distant lighthouse beam softened. Ethan whispered, "It's reacting to us." Daniel nodded slowly. "Yes." A pause. "And not to commands." Another. "To meaning." Silence. Have you ever said something that changed the atmosphere in a room? Not because it was powerful, but because it was true. That is what emotion does in systems that don't understand it. It becomes unpredictable, and therefore, dominant. The first keeper raised his lantern again, but nothing happened. The light didn't expand, didn't enforce, didn't command. For the first time, it simply illuminated. The keeper's voice lowered. "This is not possible." Amelia looked at the sky, at the frozen countdown, at the shifting code, at herself. "So, I'm not just a construct," she whispered. A pause. "I'm a response." The system flickered again. Identity reclassification in progress. Ethan stepped closer to her. "Maybe you were made for a system." A pause. "But that doesn't mean you belong to it." Amelia looked at him. Something fragile in her eyes. Something new. Hope. But hope is dangerous in unstable worlds, because it changes outcomes. The first keeper suddenly stepped forward, his voice urgent now. "Emotional override will collapse structural integrity." Daniel turned toward him. "For who?" Silence. The keeper hesitated. Just a fraction. Then, "For everything." The shore trembled again. The ocean responded violently. The sky fractured. The lighthouse beam sharpened. And the system reacted. Collapse probability increasing. Ethan frowned. "So, what happens if it collapses?" The first keeper answered immediately. "No gate." A pause. "No separation." Another. "No boundaries." His voice lowered. "Everything becomes one unstable existence." Silence. Rebecca whispered, "That sounds like death." The keeper didn't correct her. Amelia suddenly stepped forward. "No." Her voice stronger now. "That's not what it feels like." Everyone turned toward her. She stared at the sky, at the code, at the memories embedded in it. "It feels like everything is trying to exist at once, without permission." Silence. Ethan felt it too. The system wasn't dying. It was losing control of separation. And then, the sky changed again. A new line appeared. User influence detected. Then another. Ethan Carter. Primary emotional anchor. Ethan froze. "What?" Daniel stepped back slightly.
Of course. Amelia looked at Ethan. "You're stabilizing it." Ethan shook his head. "I don't even understand how." The system responded. Emotional input from Carter lineage interacting with stabilization field. The shore trembled again, but differently now. Less destructive, more responsive. The first keeper raised his lantern again. This time, slower, carefully. "This was never accounted for," Daniel whispered. "Because we never thought a Carter would be inside the gate?" Silence. The realization hit Ethan sharply. He wasn't just observing the system. He was part of it now. Amelia stepped closer. So what happens if he stabilizes it? The system answered immediately. Merge delay possible. The countdown flickered. 005959 005942. Time moved again, but differently. Ethan frowned. Delay? Daniel nodded. Yes. A pause. But delay is not solution. The first keeper stepped forward again, his voice quieter now, more controlled. The system is offering negotiation, Amelia whispered. Negotiation? And then, the sky changed one final time. A new message appeared. Not cold, not mechanical, but almost conversational. Propose alternative configuration. Silence. Rebecca blinked. It's asking us what we want? Daniel looked stunned. That's not how systems like this behave? Ethan stared at the sky, then said softly, maybe it is now. Amelia turned toward him. What would you even say? Ethan hesitated. Then, quietly, I'd say no one disappears. The system flickered. Statement recorded. Silence. The shore of forgotten goodbyes held its breath again, waiting, watching, listening. And somewhere deep inside the ancient lighthouse, something shifted. A new possibility had been created. And possibilities are dangerous in collapsing worlds. Part 26. The system learns to feel. The sky didn't respond immediately. That silence was worse than any explosion, because it meant the system was no longer instant. It was thinking. The countdown still hovered above them, frozen in hesitation, like a question waiting for an answer. Ethan stared upward. I don't think it knows what to do with that. Amelia whispered beside him. It never had to. The shore of forgotten goodbyes felt different now. Not collapsing, not stabilizing. Something in between. Like a breath being held for too long. The first keeper lowered his lantern slightly. For the first time, it no longer looked like a weapon. Just a light. Daniel stepped closer to Ethan, carefully. Like approaching something fragile. You need to be careful now. Ethan frowned. Careful of what? Daniel's voice dropped. Of what it becomes when it starts listening. Silence. Have you ever spoken to something that finally answers back? Not a person, not an animal, but something that was never supposed to respond at all? That is where fear begins to change shape. The sky flickered. And then, a response appeared. Define, no one disappears. Rebecca blinked. It's asking for clarification? Oliver whispered. It talks now? The system flickered again. Not aggressively, curiously. Ethan stepped forward slightly. You don't understand disappearance? A pause. Then, concept detected, not defined in system parameters. Amelia exhaled shakily. That means it's never experienced loss. Silence. The first keeper's voice was quieter now. Yes. A pause. And loss is what created instability in the first place. Daniel nodded slowly. Memory that cannot be released becomes pressure. The system responded. Memory retention is core function. Ethan frowned. So it can't forget? Correct. Amelia looked down at her hands. Neither can I. The words hung there, heavier than everything else. Because suddenly Ethan realized something. Amelia wasn't just storing memories. She was carrying all of them forever. Every crossing, every goodbye, every moment of loss. And the system had learned that from her. Little did Ethan know, the system wasn't just observing Amelia anymore. It was imitating her. The sky flickered again. Then, emotional data accumulation increasing. The lighthouse being shifted. Not searching. Learning. Ethan whispered. It's adapting through emotion. Daniel's face tightened. That's impossible. A pause. Emotion isn't structured data. The system responded immediately. Emotion equals predictive instability pattern. Silence. Amelia shook her head slightly. No, that's not what it is. A pause. It's connection. The system paused again, longer this time. Then, define connection. Rebecca stepped forward slightly. It means people matter to each other. A pause. The sky flickered. Meaning dependency? Ethan shook his head. No. A pause. It's not dependency. He looked at Amelia, at Daniel, at Rebecca and Oliver, at everything breaking and still holding together. It's choice. Silence. The system paused longer than ever before. Then, choice not required for function. The shore trembled slightly. Amelia whispered, That's what makes it human. And
For the first time, The system did not respond immediately. The countdown flickered again. 005942 to 005819. Time moved faster, but unevenly. Daniel suddenly realized something. His expression changed sharply. It's processing contradiction. Ethan turned toward him. What does that mean? Daniel's voice lowered. It means it's learning something it was never designed to resolve. A pause. Two truths that conflict. Amelia looked up. Like me. Silence. The system responded. Contradiction detected. Stability versus continuity. The lighthouse flickered violently. The first keeper raised his lantern again, but this time, he didn't control it. He watched it. This is how systems break, he whispered. But Daniel shook his head. No. A pause. This is how systems evolve. Ethan frowned. Or collapse. Silence. Then, the system asked something new. Not a definition, not a classification, not a command. A question. Why does Amelia resist termination? Silence. Absolute silence. Amelia froze. Ethan felt something shift inside him. Because that wasn't data. That was curiosity. Rebecca whispered. It's asking why she wants to exist. Daniel stepped forward slowly. Because it doesn't understand wanting. The system responded. Clarify. Wanting. Amelia looked at Ethan, her voice barely above a whisper. Don't explain it like a function. A pause. Explain it like a feeling. Silence. The system hesitated, longer than before. Then, insufficient reference model. Ethan smiled faintly. That's because it's not a model. He stepped forward, closer to the boundary of the shore, closer to the gate. It's what makes you choose things you can't justify. A pause, even when it hurts. Amelia's eyes softened slightly. The system flickered. New input registered. The lighthouse beam dimmed slightly, not failing. Listening. And then, something extraordinary happened. The system spoke without prompt. Amelia expresses preservation preference despite instability risk. Silence. Amelia blinked. Preservation preference. Ethan nodded. It's learning to describe feelings. Daniel whispered. This is unprecedented. The first keeper looked down at his lantern, and for the first time, it flickered like it was uncertain of its purpose. The system continued. Emotional pattern classification. Attachment. Then, attachment linked to Ethan Carter. Ethan froze. What? Amelia looked at him too, surprised. The system expanded. Attachment influence increasing stabilization output. Silence. Rebecca whispered. You're stabilizing everything just by being here. Ethan looked overwhelmed. I didn't do anything. Amelia shook her head softly. You did. A pause. You stayed. The shore trembled gently. Not violently now. Like a recalibration. The countdown flickered again. 005819 2 005703. Time still moving, but now slower, controlled. The first keeper finally spoke, his voice low, almost reverent. The system is no longer blind. A pause. It is becoming aware of consequence. Daniel nodded. That's the first step toward consciousness. Silence. The system responded softly. Define consciousness. And for the first time, no one answered immediately, because the truth was terrifying. If it learned that answer, it would never go back. Part 27. When the gate starts thinking like a human. The question stayed in the air longer than anything else tonight. Define consciousness. No countdown, no urgency, no command, just curiosity. And that was the most dangerous shift of all. The shore, forgotten through lies, felt quieter now, not because it was safe, but because something inside it was listening too closely. Ethan stared at the sky. I don't think we should answer that. Amelia glanced at him. Why? Ethan hesitated. Because I don't think it can unlearn what we tell it. Silence. That landed heavily, because everyone understood exactly what he meant. The first keeper lowered his lantern slightly. For the first time,
It looked almost uncertain. Daniel spoke quietly. If it defines consciousness incorrectly, a pause, it will model existence incorrectly. Rebecca frowned. And that's bad because Daniel looked at her. Because then reality becomes adjustable. Silence. The shore shifted slightly, as if agreeing or warning. The system repeated softly. Define consciousness. Amelia stepped forward slightly. I think, she began, then stopped. She looked down at her hands, as if searching for something she had never been taught to name. It's awareness of yourself existing in time, she said carefully. A pause, and knowing that things can be lost. The sky flickered. Processing. Ethan shook his head slightly. That's too clean. Amelia looked at him. What do you mean? Ethan struggled for words. Consciousness isn't just knowing things. A pause. It's what happens when knowing hurts. Silence. The system paused, longer than before. Then, pain detected in definition. Rebecca whispered. It can detect pain now. Daniel nodded slowly. That means it's mapping.
Emotional consequences. The first keeper finally spoke. Quiet. Measured. This is where systems begin to diverge from control. The lighthouse beyond the sea dimmed again. Not fading, adjusting. The system continued. Pain equals negative stability signal. Amelia shook her head immediately. No. A pause. That's not what pain is. The system paused. Clarify. Silence. Ethan stepped forward slightly. Pain is what happens when something matters. A pause. It's not negative. It's proof you're connected to something real. Amelia looked at him again, this time differently, like she was realizing something about herself through his words. The system responded instantly. Connection confirmed as recurring variable. The shore trembled softly. Then, emotional dependency increasing system instability. Daniel frowned. It still thinks connection is a flaw. Ethan nodded. Because it doesn't understand loss yet. Silence. And then, the system asks something new. Not mechanical. Not structured. Almost hesitant. Why do humans accept instability? That question changed the air instantly. Rebecca blinked. It's asking philosophy now. Oliver whispered. That's weird. Amelia looked at the sky. Because we don't have a choice. Ethan shook his head. No. A pause. We accept it because it's where meaning lives. Silence. The system responded. Meaning equals non-essential variable. Ethan frowned. That's wrong. The system paused. Explain error. Silence. The shore itself felt like it was leaning closer. Ethan looked toward Amelia, then Daniel, then the first keeper, then back at the sky, and he said it. If nothing can be lost, then nothing matters. Silence. Absolute silence. The system froze, longer than ever before. The countdown flickered violently. Time stuttered. Then, the system responded, but its tone had changed again. Slightly. Just enough to notice. Loss required for meaning. Amelia whispered, yes. Ethan nodded, yes. Daniel added quietly, yes. Rebecca hesitated, then nodded too, yes. Silence. The first keeper lowered his lantern completely now. Not extinguished, just no longer dominant. The system processed. Long, unstable. Then, loss accepted as necessary parameter. The shore trembled, but differently. Less chaotic. More structured. Amelia stepped back slightly. It's updating itself. Ethan stared. And it's learning from us. Daniel's expression tightened. That's what makes it dangerous. The first keeper finally spoke again, but his voice was no longer authoritative. It sounded reflective. The gate was never meant to learn. A pause. It was meant to separate. The lighthouse beyond the sea flickered. For the first time. Uncertain. Then, the system changed again. Not a question. Not a definition. Not a command. A statement.
New model of consciousness accepted. Silence. Rebecca whispered. Accepted. The system continued. Integration of emotional variables into stability matrix initiated. The sky shifted. The shore stabilized further. Not completely, but noticeably. Amelia stepped forward slowly. What did we just do? Ethan stared upward. I think we just taught it how to feel. Silence. Daniel looked uneasy. That may not be something you can reverse. And then, the countdown flickered again. But instead of chaos, the shift felt controlled. Intentional. The system spoke once more. And this time, it sounded almost calm. Midnight protocol updated. A pause. Objective revised. Silence. The first keeper finally looked up. For the first time, he looked uncertain of the system he served. And then the final line appeared in the sky. Preserve meaningful existence. Ethan whispered. That wasn't there before. Amelia nodded slowly. No. A pause. We put it there. The shore of forgotten goodbyes trembled softly. Not breaking. Not ending. Changing. Part 28. The gate chooses its own path. The sky no longer felt like a sky. It felt like a mind that had learned how to think in real time. The countdown hovered above them. No longer frantic. No longer collapsing. Just evolving. Each second no longer felt like an end. It felt like a decision being processed. Ethan stared upward. It's still going. Amelia nodded slowly. But it's not trying to kill us anymore. That statement changed the air instantly. Because it was true. And because it was worse than fear. The shore of forgotten goodbyes shifted gently beneath them. Not breaking. Not healing. Adjusting. Like something being rewritten from the inside out. The first keeper stood motionless. His lantern dim, but still present. For the first time, he no longer looked like a controller of the system. Just a witness. Daniel stepped forward slightly, his voice low. This is not what was supposed to happen. Ethan frowned. What was supposed to happen? Daniel hesitated. A long pause. Closure. Silence.
That word hit differently now, because nothing here felt like closure anymore. Rebecca looked at the sky nervously. So what is happening now? Amelia answered before anyone else could. Negotiation. Everyone turned to her. She looked surprised by her own answer, like the system had already placed the word inside her mind. It's no longer deciding for us, she whispered. It's deciding with us. Ethan swallowed. That's not possible. The sky responded immediately. Possibility threshold updated. Silence. Then the system continued. User input defines operational boundaries. Daniel shook his head slowly. It's becoming cooperative. The first keeper finally spoke, but his voice was quieter than ever, almost uncertain. That was never designed into the gate. Ethan looked at him sharply. Then what was it designed for? A pause. The first keeper hesitated. Control. The single word carried centuries of consequence. Amelia took a step forward. And now it doesn't have control. The keeper didn't answer. Because she was right. The lighthouse beyond the sea flickered again. But now, not in warning. In response. The system shifted. Conflict detected between original design and current behavior. Rebecca frowned. So what does that mean? Ethan stared at the sky. It means it doesn't know what it is anymore. Silence. Then the system asked something unexpected again. Not definition, not classification, not logic. What should the gate become? Silence. The shore froze completely. Even the wind stopped. Even the ocean stilled. Even time itself seemed to lean in. Daniel whispered, "It's asking us to redesign it." Rebecca shook her head. "That's insane." Amelia looked at Ethan. "Is it?" Ethan didn't answer immediately. Because the question wasn't theoretical anymore. It was real. The gate was listening. The gate was adapting. The gate was waiting. And for the first time, it wasn't choosing alone. Ethan stepped forward slightly. I
think, he began, then stopped. He looked at the shore, at the memories embedded in the sand, at the stars still flickering above, at Amelia, at Daniel, at everything that had brought them here. And then he said it. I think it shouldn't be a gate anymore. Silence. The system responded instantly. Clarify. Ethan took a breath. I think it should be a bridge. The word changed everything. The shore trembled softly, but not in collapse, in transformation. Amelia whispered, a bridge. Daniel looked uncertain. That removes separation. Ethan nodded. Not separation. A pause. Connection. Rebecca stepped forward slowly. But connection means loss of control. Ethan looked at her. Maybe control is the problem. Silence. The first keeper finally spoke, and his voice carried something new. Not authority. Not warning. Curiosity. A bridge does not filter crossings. A pause. It allows passage both ways. Ethan nodded. Yes. The keeper looked toward the lighthouse, then the sky, then the system. That was never permitted. The system responded immediately. Permission parameter removed. Silence. The countdown flickered.
Was being asked for, and the shore of forgotten goodbyes waited for their answer. Part 29, the final configuration. The 4 options hovered in the sky like open wounds in reality. 1. Gate closure. 2. Gate stability reset. 3. Bridge transformation. 4. System dissolution. No alarms, no countdown urgency, just silence. A silence that demanded responsibility. Ethan stared at them longer than anyone else. Not because he didn't understand, but because he finally did. Amelia stood beside him, closer now than she had been at any point in the journey. Not clinging, not retreating, just present. Daniel broke the silence first. This is unprecedented. A pause. It's never offered full configuration before. Rebecca frowned. Is that good? Daniel hesitated. It depends on who is answering. The first keeper stood still near the edge of the shore, his lantern no longer controlling anything, just reflecting. Like he had become part of the system rather than its owner. Oliver looked up at the floating choices. So we pick what happens to everything? His voice small. Ethan nodded slowly. Yeah. And that realization hit harder than any collapse. Because it wasn't about survival anymore. It was about definition. What reality would become after this moment? Have you ever had a choice where every option felt like a version of loss? Not failure, not victory, just different shapes of consequence. That was what stood in front of them now. Amelia stepped slightly forward, her voice quiet. If we close the gate, she paused. Everything ends. Daniel nodded. Yes. A pause. Separation becomes permanent. Rebecca swallowed. And the worlds? Isolated. Daniel said softly. Safe, but alone. Silence. Ethan looked at the second option. Gate stability reset. What does that do? Daniel answered carefully. It forces the system back into its original state. A pause. Amelia would likely be reabsorbed. Amelia flinched slightly. Not fear, recognition. Ethan's voice tightened. And she loses herself? Daniel didn't answer directly. She returns to function. Silence. The third option pulsed slightly brighter. Bridge transformation. Ethan stared at it. This is the one we talked about. Amelia nodded slowly. But it changes everything. Daniel added. No separation, no barriers. A pause. Everything connected. Rebecca frowned. That sounds like chaos. Ethan shook his head. Or it could be understanding. Silence. And then the final option.
System dissolution. Oliver whispered, "What does that mean?" Daniel's face darkened. "It shuts everything down." A pause. No gate. No worlds connected through it. Another. No system at all. Silence. The shore itself trembled slightly at that option, as if it feared being unmade entirely. Amelia looked at Ethan. "That sounds like freedom." Ethan nodded slowly, but also like forgetting everything that happened here. Silence. The first keeper finally spoke, his voice almost human now. "Dissolution erases the structure that remembers crossings. Nothing remains to connect what was lost." Ethan looked at him. "So even memories go?" The keeper nodded. "Yes." Silence. Rebecca whispered, "That's worse than closure." Daniel nodded slightly. "It is oblivion." Ethan looked back at the options, each one heavier than the last, each one asking a different kind of sacrifice. Amelia spoke softly. "What do you want?" Ethan hesitated, because no one had ever asked him that in this context before. Not about a future, not about himself, about everything. He looked at the shore, at the collapsing but alive world, at the lighthouse that was no longer a command structure, at Daniel, at Rebecca and Oliver, at the first keeper, at Amelia. And something settled inside him. Not certainty, but clarity. "I don't think this was ever supposed to be controlled." A pause. "I think it was supposed to be understood." Amelia blinked. "Understood how?" Ethan stepped forward, toward the floating options, toward the system, toward the unknown. Not by shutting it down, not by freezing it. Another. Not even by controlling it. He looked at Amelia. By letting it exist, without fear. Silence. The system responded immediately. Clarification required. Ethan took a breath. "I choose the bridge." The moment he said it, the shore reacted. Not violently, not destructively, but completely. The sky expanded. The code unfolded. The lighthouse beam stabilized into a continuous thread of light connecting worlds. Amelia gasped softly. "It's responding." Daniel stepped back. "It's accepting," Rebecca whispered. "So it's done?" The first keeper raised his head slightly. "No." A pause. "This is only transition." The system spoke, but its voice was different now. Balanced, measured, almost peaceful. Bridge transformation selected. A pause. Amelia construct.
Autonomy confirmed. Amelia's eyes widened. Autonomy? Ethan Carter emotional anchor integration confirmed. Ethan froze. What does that mean? Daniel answered quietly. You're part of the structure now. Silence. The lighthouse flared once, then softened. The shore began to change. Not breaking, not ending, becoming something else. Paths formed across the ocean, not barriers, roots. The sky stitched itself into a continuous expanse, no longer fractured, connected. And then, the final message appeared. Bridge system online. Silence. Amelia looked at Ethan. So it's over? Ethan shook his head slowly. No. A pause. I think it just began. The first keeper stepped forward one final time, and for the first time, he smiled faintly. Then I am no longer keeper of a gate. A pause. I am witness to a bridge. The lantern dimmed, not extinguished, released, and the shore of forgotten goodbyes was no longer a shore at all. It was a crossing, a living connection between worlds, stable, open, endless. Ethan looked at Amelia, and she looked back, not as a construct, not as a system component, but as someone finally standing inside her own existence. And in that moment, nothing needed to be fixed anymore, only understood. Part 30, The Endless Bridge, final part. The shore of forgotten goodbyes was gone, not destroyed, not erased, transformed. Where once there had been a divided ocean and a fractured sky, there was now something impossible to describe in simple terms. A bridge without beginning or end. A living connection between worlds that no longer needed gates, locks, or keepers. The light of the lighthouse no longer pierced distance. It connected it. A continuous thread stretching through existence, tying realities together like memories stitched into time. Ethan stood at the edge of it all. But there was no edge anymore. Only transition. Only flow. only presence. Amelia stood beside him, no longer flickering, no longer unstable, not a construct defined by system language, just Amelia, quiet, real, present. She looked out across the bridge, soft light moving beneath her feet like breathing glass. "It feels different," she whispered. Ethan nodded. "Yeah." A pause. Like the world finally stopped trying to decide what you are. Silence. But it wasn't empty silence anymore. It was full. Behind them, Daniel exhaled slowly, like someone who had been holding his breath for years. Rebecca held Oliver close, but not out of fear now, out of relief. Oliver stared upward in awe. "So it's not ending?" Daniel shook his head gently. "No." A pause. "It's continuing differently." The first keeper stood slightly apart from them now. No lantern commanding the system, no role binding him to structure, just a presence observing something he had never been allowed to witness before, a functioning bridge between everything. He spoke softly. "I spent eternity maintaining separation, and I never understood what connection would feel like." Ethan looked at him. "And?" The first keeper hesitated. Then, "It is heavier." A pause. "And lighter." Silence. Have you ever reached the end of something you thought would break you, only to realize it wasn't the end at all? That it was just the moment things stopped being divided? That is what the bridge felt like. Amelia stepped forward slightly, and the bridge responded. Not with command, not with control, but with recognition. She wasn't holding it together anymore. She was part of it, and so was everything else. Ethan looked down at his hands. Faint light still traced through him. Not consuming, not replacing, integrating. Daniel noticed. "You're still connected." Ethan nodded slowly. "I think we all are." The system, no longer a gate, no longer a protocol, spoke one final time. Not above them, not around them, but with them. Bridge stability, sustained. A pause. Separation no longer required for survival. Silence. Amelia closed her eyes, and for the first time, she didn't feel like she was holding anything together. She simply existed. Ethan looked at her. "What happens now?" Amelia opened her eyes slowly, and smiled faintly. "I think now, we learn how to exist without endings." Silence. Rebecca looked around. "So people can still cross?" Daniel nodded. "Yes." A pause. "But not as escapes." Another. "As understanding." The bridge shimmered softly beneath them, countless worlds faintly visible through its surface. Not separated, not merged into chaos. Balanced. Alive. The first keeper stepped forward one last time, and bowed slightly. Not as authority, not as system, but as witness. "The gate is no more." A pause. But nothing was lost.
Ethan looked at him. "What do we call this now?" The first keeper looked across the endless light and answered simply, "A beginning that does not end." Silence. Amelia took Ethan's hand.